Waduh, nge-lag. Oh my god, lag. I died. Did I die? No, I did not. Oh my god, what's happening? Waduh, gacor.
Its friendly locals and good weather, it's often portrayed as a paradise in the media. But in the last 10 years, things have started to decline. What seemed like a recovery after COVID quickly turned sour, and the country has once again entered a per capita recession, marking only the second time since 1991. Ironically, wages have actually been rising in Australia, but this means nothing when inflation is rising even quicker, making everything you want to buy more and more expensive, which means Australians are getting paid less each year relative to the price of goods and services. Adjusted for inflation, wages have actually been falling for the last 3 years, and even though this has slowed, they remain roughly at the same level as in 2009, meaning the average Australian has lost out on 14 years of progress on living standards, costing them tens of thousands of dollars. Cost of living is a term at the front of every Australian's mind, as the country is facing one of the worst squeezes in its history. Australia is a member of the Commonwealth of Nations, meaning it shares a colonial history with the United Kingdom. It's maybe then not a surprise that Australia and the United Kingdom share a lot of the same issues. Both countries are seeing wages drop, living standards fall, and most importantly, both are facing an issue with a fundamental aspect of daily life: housing. Everyone needs somewhere to live, but the problem in Australia is that no one can seem to afford it. Australia's biggest city, Sydney, ranks as the second most unaffordable in the entire world. And when we expand this list to look at the top 10, Melbourne and Adelaide also make the cut, with other major hubs, Perth and Brisbane, not far behind. The prospect of owning a house is increasingly becoming a dream for many across the country, especially for those entering the housing market for the first time. Unfortunately, Australia's problems don't just end there. As it stands, even by 2028, real wages will be the same as what they were in 2014. And unless they grow faster than they did before the pandemic, the gap in living standards could persist until the 2030s. What's ironic is that every year hundreds of thousands of people move to Australia in search of a better life, and this in some ways is contributing to the problem. It's not hard to see why people want to come. Australia is one of the most beautiful countries in the world, but behind this picturesque postcard is a grim reality for many Australians. So how did Australia get like this, and will it get better soon? An issue in the centre of Australian media right now are recent measures to crack down on migration, and there is often bias and misinformation surrounding this debate. To help me research this topic and other points in the video, I've been using Ground News, and I'm really happy to announce that they are the partners of today's video. The media today has become ever more polarised and falsified, but with Ground News, when researching an article, I can see the number of sources and also the distribution of the political bias. Each source is also given a factuality rating, which feeds into the article's overall score. And using this timeline and geography feature, we can also see how journalists from different countries report on the source. Like India Today leading with the headline that the visa fee will hurt Indians, whereas Australian SBS takes a different approach. With over 50,000 sources, you can follow specific topics worldwide to uncover stories mainstream media may not be covering. I'm really pleased to be sponsored by an independent platform that is leading the way in bringing back impartiality to the media. So if you'd like to get a bias-free approach to news, you can scan the QR code or go to the link ground.news/invisible, where our viewers will get a special 40% off the Vantage plan I use to get unlimited access to all of their features. Click the link in the description to find out more. Australia has been a relatively prosperous country for most of its history, ever since European settlement at the end of the 18th century. In fact, by the end of the 1800s, incomes were around 40% higher than they were in the United States. But Australia's economic fortunes really shifted in the 20th century, with boom periods occurring in the 50s, 60s and 90s, but all for slightly different reasons. It's no secret that much of Australia's initial economic success was based around resource extraction. Being an island roughly the size of Western Europe and the United Kingdom combined, Australia is of course littered with an abundance of valuable natural resources. Broadly speaking, the three resources which have defined Australia's economic success have been iron ore, coal and natural gas. But most notably iron ore. Widespread extraction began in the 1950s and 60s, when a lift on an export ban flooded the area with private companies looking to secure leases so they could begin extraction. In the 60s, these companies started exporting to countries all over the world, particularly in newly industrialised nations like Japan, who were undergoing rapid growth and needed iron ore for production of steel. Mining created thousands of jobs, both in the extraction itself and in the surrounding industries, like building the railroads that connected remote regions to the coast. And it also meant Australia could begin to invest in areas to diversify its economy. Money was diverted into education to ease the transition into a service-based economy, which significantly expanded access to secondary and university education. A new generation of highly skilled, educated Australians were beginning to enter the workforce, which contributed to significant economic growth at the end of the 20th century. By the turn of the millennium, Australia looked like many developed European nations in that it was largely based on the service sector. And once again, they were well placed to take advantage of another economic growth miracle in Asia, this time China. Australia's share of iron ore exports to China increased significantly from less than 20% in the late 1990s to over 70% by the mid-2000s. The same was true for coal, and is a large reason why Australia witnessed a period of rapid growth in the early 2000s, which proved a significant buffer against the 2008 housing crisis. It's clear to see that Australia has a lot of strengths, but as we've seen with other economies, these can often mask some underlying, even bigger weaknesses. Today, the nation grapples with a number of severe issues, including rising inequality, a housing affordability crisis, and stagnant productivity, all of which stem from past policies and require urgent attention to secure a sustainable future. Perhaps the most important issue for people living in Australia currently is housing. Not only are there not enough homes, but the ones which exist have become unaffordable for the vast majority of the population, making home ownership for first-time buyers nearly impossible without an income far above the average or financial support from the so-called bank of mum and dad. And this shouldn't come as a surprise. Over the decades, the cumulative effect of not building enough homes has led to a significant supply-demand imbalance in the housing market. It's worth mentioning that Australia has been dealing with a housing crisis in some form or another for well over 20 years. Major cities like Melbourne and Sydney have always been expensive, but it's in recent years that this has become even more extreme. To put this situation into perspective, the most recent estimates suggest that to buy an average home in Sydney, a family would need to earn around $280,000 per year. Compare this to the average annual income in Sydney of $120,000 per year, and it's easy to see why many people cannot afford a home. Like any economic issue, its causes are multifaceted, but at the end of the day, there are simply not enough houses to meet the ever-growing demand. Australia's housing supply of 420 per 1,000 people was low compared to OECD standards, and the shortage of housing stock has been making it more difficult to find a property to buy or rent, meaning those which are available are taking up an even greater proportion of people's income. As people now need to save for an average of 11 years just to make the deposit on a home, the number of homes being offered for sale in Australia has fallen since 2015, and the number of homes for rent has been falling since early 2020. In 2023, 170,000 homes were completed, which marked the lowest number in a decade. But this isn't a recent trend. Since the 1960s, building rates in Australia per 1,000 people have been falling, and this has continued to get worse across the new century and into the 2020s. Part of this is to do with Australian culture, which places a great emphasis on the suburban environment and plenty of space to raise children in. But opting for this approach over urbanisation means fewer people live in any given area. This is particularly a problem in cities, where space comes at an even higher premium. Major hubs like Sydney and Melbourne are 3 times less densely populated than London, and 10 times less than Metro Paris. To maintain this suburban lifestyle, planning permissions for many new homes are not being granted. And combined with lots of government bureaucracy, it means that receiving approval for home developments takes months instead of weeks. It's therefore no surprise that it's nearly impossible to meet home building targets. What's ironic is that Australia is an absolute...
Companies have been trying to cut down on workers for as long as those workers have demanded pay and benefits. Whether it's downsizing, outsourcing, streamlining, understaffing, or automating, if there is something a business can do to get rid of workers and their salaries, you better believe they are going to do it. But this time does feel a little bit different. Recent AI advances have been mocked for not quite living up to the bold claims of their tech bro founders. But even in their current imperfect form, LLMs, general use robots, and generative models are already replacing jobs, and they are getting better every day. So that's bad for workers. But if you're a senior corporate executive or company owner, maybe you should be asking yourself, if we automate everybody's job, who is going to buy all of your shit?
A new study out today predicting almost half of all global jobs could be affected by artificial intelligence.
That 40% of all jobs around the world will be impacted by AI.
And found AI could replace 300 million full-time jobs, including positions in the legal and engineering fields.
So far, there are 9 robots here doing the work of more than 250 humans.
I have some good news and some bad news for your theoretical company. The good news is that labor reduction systems of all varieties have already cut out millions of man-hours in America alone and made the workers who are left more efficient at their jobs. Artificial intelligence is just another tool that your company can use to get more work out of fewer staff or replace teams entirely. Even here at Little Old Works Media Group, we used to have someone working part-time whose job it was to cut out images on Photoshop to use in our goofy little animations. Now, Adobe Suite has inbuilt AI features which can automatically remove backgrounds from any image with absolutely no human time or skill involved. Now, we love our editors, so we gave him more work editing our history videos. But there are a lot of companies that now don't need to or don't want to employ people for these simple jobs. According to a survey of 697 companies conducted by Metrigy, a research and strategic advisory firm, whatever that means, companies who did not use AI in calendar 2023 hired 89% more agents than those who did use AI in their contact centers. For existing employees, it was even worse. When AI was added to a contact center, 36.8% of companies laid off an average of 26.1% of their employees. These alarming numbers were within just 1 year. and just within call centers, which have already been hit by outsourcing, understaffing, and automation harder than most other professional services. For now. So, congratulations. Your business now has reduced headcount and significantly reduced expenses. But here comes the bad news. In 1914, Henry Ford doubled the salary of his factory workers to $5 per day. The story goes he did this because he wanted all of his employees to be able to afford a Ford Model T of their own, boosting company revenue. Now, this is basically complete nonsense. In reality, Ford just wanted to reduce staff turnover and deny talent to up-and-coming car companies like Dodge to maintain his monopoly over the growing automobile industry. But as with every good fairy tale, there is a nugget of truth in there. If the employment rate suddenly drops as hard as it did in the call centers from the study in every company around the world, then companies will undeniably struggle with reduced revenue as people without jobs don't have the buying power they once did, and even people with jobs will cut back out of fear that they might be next. But there is a business plan that you, as a hypothetical titan of industry, might want to consider so that this isn't a problem. And that's just making stuff exclusively for other wealthy business owners while diverting resources away from people who have nothing to offer you that can't be done more efficiently by a machine or a cheaper worker on the other side of the world. Now, if you think that sounds a bit crazy, you should know that it's already kind of happening. And the best place to see it is in video games. Yes, those occasionally fun distractions from real life are the perfect example of this shift happening in the real world right now. So let me cook. According to Grandview Research, the video game industry is now bigger than the movie, music, and television industries combined, and it has honed in its most profitable strategy. Free-to-play games are ironically some of the most profitable games on the market because they have perfected a business strategy called freemium pricing. Most people will play their games for free, but a select few, affectionately known in the industry as whales, will spend thousands, sometimes even millions of dollars on a single game to unlock in-game perks that would be almost impossible to obtain as a free user. It's important that these games still have free users though, because without them, the whales would have nobody to show off to or pwn with their paid-for advantages. In a world where people are looking for budget-friendly forms of entertainment, the game industry has realized that the best way to turn a profit is to cater to those who have the financial means, or at the very least, the credit limit, to spend ridiculous amounts of money on a video game. The people who have the most financial means don't work for their money. They own income-producing assets. And if automation does replace jobs on an even more widespread scale, that will make your ability to work less valuable and simultaneously income-producing assets more valuable. The rate of change in AI and automation makes the future impossible to predict. But if the people investing in these technologies want to see a financial return on that investment, they are going to learn what the game industry already has. There is more money to be made by catering to other rich people, and everybody else can be kept around as entertainment. Now, if you think that sounds a bit depressing, well, welcome to this channel. But also, I should tell you that market trends already say this is happening. AI isn't going to change your world. It's just going to continue a trend that's already been happening for years now. So it's time to learn how money works to find out how companies are adapting to a world where nobody can afford anything anymore. This week's lesson is sponsored by Brilliant. Brilliant is an educational platform designed for comprehending what you learn. It focuses on a bottom-up learning strategy, starting with the fundamentals using interactive problem-solving activities. Learning and retaining knowledge this way is shown to be 6 times more effective than traditional video lectures. The courses available on Brilliant are carefully crafted by world-class educators, scholars, and professionals from leading organizations and institutions such as MIT, Caltech, Duke, Microsoft, Google, and more. Brilliant's growing number of programming courses are a great way to build foundations and learn real-world applications. I recently took their course on creative coding, which builds your computational problem-solving skills by writing programs that produce complex outputs. With Brilliant, learning is accessible from anywhere using a computer, smartphone, or tablet. Brilliant provides opportunities to acquire real knowledge in just a few minutes each day with its captivating and enjoyable lessons, seamlessly integrating into your schedule whenever you have time. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/howmanyworks or click the link in the description. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. In the 1992 movie Glengarry Glen Ross, the iconic Always Be closing scene has Alec Baldwin's character bragging to another salesman about driving an $80,000 BMW. Adjusted for $1992 according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that would be the equivalent of just under $182,000 today. That is a very expensive automobile, to be sure. But these days, if you drive around a major city, you're likely to see dozens of cars that cost that much or more, and they probably wouldn't even stand out that much. According to company sales data and historic records, Lamborghini has sold more cars in the last 10 years alone than it did in all the rest of the company's history combined, because there is simply a bigger market for $300,000 cars than ever before. The same general trend is true for other extreme luxury brands like Bentley, Ferrari, Patek Philippe, luxury groceries at Erewhon, gym memberships that cost more than rent, hotels that make Hilton look like a Holiday Inn, and to top it off, private jets are all now way more popular than they ever have been. One thing that often gets lost in discussions of wealth inequality is that, yes, billionaires are getting richer, but there are also far more rich people around than ever before, and it's because the value of an hour of human labor has stayed more or less stagnant, while the value of an asset and the availability of credit has skyrocketed. People who held onto an even modest portfolio over the last 4 years now have enormous fortunes. Certain individuals got incredibly lucky with good investments, and other people accessed easy credit to get absolutely jacked to the tits on leverage and ride the longest asset bull run in history. Very few people have made modern fortunes through work alone. And you might have even noticed how investing went from something that you should do to secure your retirement to something you need to do to have any quality of life at all. If robots really do take over, then it will just continue to push the value of an hour of human work down, because it could be done by a machine instead. And it will rally the value of assets because business owners and investors will benefit from the free labor substitute. This is where people point to policy fixes like a universal basic income. If you haven't heard about this idea by now, that's impressive. But it's basically a government payment made to everybody, regardless of personal financial conditions, that should be enough to cover basic living expenses. It's been proposed as a solution to keep the whole system going if people can't earn an income for themselves because their labor has been outsourced or automated. But that is still not a desirable outcome for anybody. If comprehensive automation of human labor gets as far as needing this, then you will fall into one of two defined classes of people. You will either be getting by based on a government lifeline, or you will be in the class of people that own the businesses complaining about all the taxes they need to pay to fund that lifeline. I find it a little bit easier to sympathize with one of those groups. But there are still no winners. Just last week, the results of one of the most comprehensive universal basic income experiments was published. The research gave 1,000 people living in Texas and Illinois $1,000 a month with no conditions attached. To qualify for this study, their 2019 household income had to be less than 300% of the federal poverty line, or $37,470 for an individual. There was also an unlucky control group of 2,000 people who were only given $50 a month. This is because when your personal finances are being studied, you are more likely to be careful about your spending decisions.
This is what a $25 million a year salary looks like versus a $25,000 a year salary. About 20% of Americans live on this amount of money or less. I want to show you the lifestyles of people who make this much money versus this much money, and everything in between. The reason I want to look at these differences is because of this graph. It's going up, which is a problem. Let's start with $25,000 a year.
All right, so let's say my name is George. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I am single and I have no kids. And I'm looking for a job.
After some searching, I found this job as a security guard at a TV studio in downtown Atlanta. It'll pay me $12.50 an hour, which is quite a bit more than the minimum wage of $7.25 an hour.
Let's assume I work 40 hours a week, and I work every week except 2 that I set aside for holidays, sickness, and vacation. This means I make $25,000 a year. At this level, around 29% of Americans earn as much or less than me. So how will I spend it? This comes out to be just over $2,000 a month that I have to spend. I gotta pay taxes. That brings me down to $1,764 to live on this month. To calculate this next part, for this income and all of the incomes we're looking at, I used some data from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics that shows that people in this income bracket spend about 41% of their pre-tax income on housing. I've got about $850 for all my housing expenses. That's nearly half my after-tax budget. I'll definitely be renting instead of owning a house at this budget.
A lot of landlords these days require you to earn 3 times more the monthly rent. So I'm probably gonna need roommates if I'm gonna get approved for apartment. All right, let's look at Craigslist. I really can't afford to live downtown, so I'm gonna look in the outskirts. And I found this place right outside the city. This is gonna work, and it's within my budget for rent and utilities. So how am I gonna get to my job, which is in downtown Atlanta? That's 20 minutes away from where I live. And like most American cities, there's not great public transportation here, so I'm gonna need to have a car. Let's just say in this assumption, and it's kind of a big assumption, that I already have a car. And let's assume it's this car. It's a 2004 Toyota Solera that I got on Facebook Marketplace. Lower income Americans spend more on their income for transportation than any other segment of the population. The data we'll use says about 15% of pre-tax income is spent on transportation. So that's $313 for gas, insurance, parking, and saving up for maintenance and repairs. We gotta be pretty careful about how much extra driving we do, and hope that no big maintenance issues arise. According to this BLS data, I spend about 15% of my income on food. That includes both groceries and eating out. That's $313 a month for food. A lot of people think that this income bracket just goes to McDonald's all of the time, but the reality is the average order amount at McDonald's is between $7 and $8, so that will not get me through the month. That will get me through 13 days worth of food. So I gotta go to the grocery store. Unfortunately, in most lower income areas in this country, there aren't a ton of grocery stores, and the ones that are available are much less likely to carry fresh produce or other nutritious food. And this is what I can do by stocking up on beans, rice, peanut butter and jelly, Wonder Bread, Top Ramen, freezer meals. For fresh options, I'll be looking at potatoes and some of the cheaper produce, and no eating out, or rarely, occasionally, on special occasions, eating out. If I do, I'll be looking at the value menu at a fast food restaurant. I'll be looking for discounts, checking every price in the convenience store. Okay, but wait, don't I get government assistance for food, like food stamps? So from my research, I can see that to get government assistance, I need my savings account to be less than $2,000. Check. My income needs to be lower than $19,578. And I make $25,000, so nope, I don't qualify. Okay, so we've covered our basic needs of housing, food, and transportation, but I still have a lot of expenses. We hear a lot about healthcare being a massive personal cost, but what does that actually look like? Georgia's Medicaid website says that I qualify for government help, but even with that, I will be paying around 10% of my income on health-related expenses like medicine, doctor visits, getting care that isn't covered by this government insurance. This is one of the reasons why people in my income bracket live around 7 years less than the richest Americans. After all these main expenses, I'm left with a small amount of money for everything else. And there's a lot more that I need to spend just to live. Laundry, internet connection, cell phone. Conservatively, that adds up to $105, not taking into account the overcharges and hidden fees. Like, you're starting to see what's happening here. This doesn't add up. Entertainment, fitness, and travel just isn't feasible. I have no emergency savings, no rainy day fund, and live in stress of an unexpected car repair, a health emergency. Any of these unexpected charges could be a major setback. I'm probably gonna have to join the huge number of Americans that rely on debt to get through the month, whether that's credit card debt or short-term loans with high interest rates. Maybe I'll need to move back in with my parents or take on a second job. Maybe I'll start driving Uber or DoorDash. But what's clear is that my full-time job, which pays much more than the minimum wage, is still not enough to make it through the month. I'm gonna pause the video really quick. I'm excited about the sponsor of today's video. It's the first time they're sponsoring a video, and it is Headspace. I started using Headspace over a decade ago when I was in college, and I was first getting into meditation, and I love it. Headspace is an app, but it's also just a general guide for people who want to get into meditation but don't know how, which is what I was 10 years ago when I was starting my journey of meditation. First, let me tell you why meditation is important in my life. I find that our minds are like muscles. They're like something that can be trained and reshaped. Meditation is kind of like exercise for that muscle. It helps you retrain and reshape how your brain works. And there's no spiritual or religious requirement to any of this. Good meditation and mindfulness are simply a practice that brings more peace into your life. Headspace is a platform, a community, and a guide that teaches you how to do this. It guides you through meditations. The platform has a huge number of guided meditations. It also has this really cool feature where in the morning it will prompt you to watch like a very peaceful, thought-provoking video that will sort of ground you and give you perspective for the day, all done in this like really beautiful animation aesthetic, which I'm super into. For me, Headspace took meditation out of like the new age kind of like hippie spirituality and into like a very accessible, very grounded, guided approach. And by the way, mindfulness meditation has like a very, very strong basis of scientific evidence to be very effective in promoting a healthy mind and even treating things like depression and anxiety, something I've actually thought about making a whole video on. Studies have shown that using Headspace for 30 days can reduce your stress by 32%. For now, I want to tell you that Headspace is offering 60 days, it's like 2 months, for free to anyone who uses my link. It's down in the description. There's also a QR code here on screen. So go try Headspace out for free for 60 days. See if it's a helpful addition to your life. Thank you, Headspace, for sponsoring today's video, supporting our journalism. And with that, let's get on to the next income tier.
All right, now let's see what we can do with $40,000 a year.
Now my name is Simon. I am the representative of the median American income of a single earner. I make $40,000 a year as an event coordinator at a country club in Atlanta. My $40,000 salary gives me just over $3,000 a month. After federal and state taxes, I'm left with just under $2,700. Using that same data set, my budget for housing is $1,133. I'm kind of feeling this one-bedroom house. Let's say between rent for this house and my utilities, I'm paying $1,133 for my monthly housing expenses. The country club is kind of far from my house, and because there's no public transportation, I'm gonna need a car. I saved up and purchased this 2011 Subaru Forester on Facebook Marketplace. I got it for $4,500. So, like George, I spend about $136 a month just on gas to get to my job. This leaves me with a little over $400 for everything else. Guys gotta eat. What am I gonna do for food? According to the BLS data, someone like me spends around $467 a month on food. I typically spend about $100 a week on groceries and can use the rest on a dinner out or two. I've got a Kroger grocery store 4 minutes away from my house. And at this point, I'm definitely cognizant of every price on these shelves. I'm using coupons, trying to get the best deal, but I have leeway to spend a little bit more on maybe a decent cut of meat or some fresh produce. Maybe I buy organic every once in a while. I can comfortably feed myself if I'm smart about how I spend and I don't eat out too much. This income level is right on the threshold where employers start to sponsor your healthcare plan. They start to subsidize it. That's a thing here in America. And luckily, my employer does. But even still, I spend $300 a month on health, medicine, out-of-pocket doctors, pre-deductible expenses, and now I get to pay for a gym. I signed up for this low-cost gym for $10 a month. So after covering these basic needs, I have $231 left for everything else, all of my other essentials. Laundry, cell phone, internet brings me down to $126. I will try to put some of this away for an emergency or a trip, put it into a savings account with a good interest rate so it will grow over time. But to be honest, I'm probably gonna spend this on entertainment. Like, I wanna go out and have fun. I wanna go to a movie. I wanna subscribe to Hulu and Netflix. I might buy a book, might go out with some friends. And after all of that, I end up around zero. So all in all, I'm doing better than George, but not that much better. I've got some money left over at the end of the month, but an emergency expense would still leave me in debt.
All right, let's up this to 100 grand a year and see what our budget looks like.
Okay, now I'm Tim, and I just found this job in sales. It makes me $100,000 a year. I'm officially in 6 figures. I make 4 times more than George, and double the median income that Simon makes. I'm now near the top 10% of earners in this country. My salary gives me $8,333 every month. $2,200 of that is gonna go to taxes, and I'm left with just over 6 grand. In this income bracket, you see that people spend around 30% of their income on housing. Until recently, this salary would have been more than enough to buy a house, but these days, not so much. But for the case of our assumption, let's assume that I, Tim, have been saving for 10 years, and I'm finally ready to purchase my first home. Zillow is telling me that I can afford a house that's around $314,000. I'm gonna buy this nice 1-bedroom townhouse in Atlanta. It's got these nice wood floors, all of this natural light. Oh wait, no, looks like there's a condo fee, $426 per month, probably for that fancy workout room. Okay, we're gonna have to keep looking. Okay, I found one. The 1-bedroom condo, got a fireplace, access to a pool and a fitness room. It's in a pretty good location, and it's just under $260,000. With the condo fee, I'll be paying around $2,700 per month, which is about 32% of my income for housing. I get to spend more on housing than George and Simon make in a month. Oh, and by the way, I will have to cough up $20,000, which is my whole savings, for a 5% down payment and closing cost to make this house purchase. Thanks to my good credit, I can qualify for a good car loan that allows me to buy this beauty, $50,000 BMW. It'll cost me $754 a month for 5 years, and it will leave me with $579 every month to spend on gas, repairs, and insurance. I'm even starting to be able to afford to bring it to a professional car wash place, get it detailed every couple months. I am upper middle class now, so I only have to pay 11% of my income on food per month just to feed myself. I get to eat out a lot more lately. When I'm at the grocery store, I get to peruse the fresh and nutritious food much more abundantly. I can buy nice meat and nice produce. I'm not overly concerned about the prices. And lately, since meal delivery apps have become more common, I'm ordering DoorDash like once or twice a week. I'm starting to be able to use money to save myself time and stress. My job pays for a lot of my health insurance, and yet I still pay $500 a month on health, medicine, and these kind of expensive supplements I've been buying. I'm able to save money at this point so that a minor medical emergency isn't a huge deal. But the doctors I do go to have to be covered by my insurance plan. I can't go out of network. It'd be too expensive to pay out of pocket. With all my big expenses covered, I still have $665 to cover Wi-Fi, unlimited data on my phone, and since laundry and a gym are in my apartment, I actually don't need to use much cash for that. So even after all of these essentials, I have money to save and invest. And even still, I have cash left over to go out with friends. Every few months, I'm able to save up enough to go on vacation. My work pays me even when I'm taking time off, so I don't need to worry about that. I do have to strategically choose my travel locations to make sure that they're affordable. Because I chose a cheaper place, I'm able to enjoy drinks and food while I'm there. When I come home, I do have to save and scrounge for a couple of months to recuperate, but it's not too stressful. Not bad, and in fact, much better than the vast majority of Americans.
All right, now let's up this to $1 million a year and see what our budget starts to look like.
Hi, my name is Noah. I am a junior managing director at a big private equity fund. I'm in finance.
I'm looking for a man in finance.
I work 70 hours a week. I make big deals. They're very important. And I am earning $1 million a year. That is $83,000 a month. After taxes, it's more like $48,000 a month. In 1 month, I'm making double what George makes in an entire year. In 3 years, I'll make more than he makes in an entire lifetime. I've got some serious money to work with here. Like, I'm officially among the top 1% of income earners in this country. And I'm very lucky because my income and wealth are increasing at a faster rate than everyone else's. And we'll see why in just a second. Making this much money, I can get a really nice house by spending 28% of my income, which means I can afford around a $2.6 million house. Wow, this one's kind of nice. This 5-bedroom, 5-bathroom home in this quiet Atlanta suburb. Man, it is nice here. Look at this kitchen. Oh, and this beautiful yard out here. I might pick up croquet. And it even comes with this little friend. Hey, bud. I've always wanted my own taxidermy fox. This house is gonna cost me around $19,000 every month for the mortgage and other expenses, like house cleaners that come once a week to clean my entire house and do my laundry. My yard is maintained by a local landscaping company. I'm spending 16% of my income on transportation, which means a little over $13,000 a month on everything cars and planes. Instead of owning a car, I lease one in 3-year periods so that I can always be driving the newest, fanciest car. Like this Rivian. It's gonna cost me about $1,000 a month all in. I can totally afford that. I'm also taking a lot of taxis lately because I can afford it, and I can afford a private driver here and there, so I don't have a full-time private driver. I can hop on a flight too whenever I want. And when I fly internationally, I even splurge on business class. Still pretty expensive, but I've got all of these airline miles that I've racked up from all of my work travel that I actually get upgraded for free often. And now I'm actually pretty hungry, so let's talk about food. My budget for food has ballooned. Based on the BLS data, I could technically afford to spend $8,000 on food every month.
but I'm not sure that's totally common among this income bracket. There's not a ton of good data on the 1%ers. So I estimate that somebody in this bracket is spending more like $3,500 per month on food, which is still a lot. I'm officially deep in the don't look at food prices, don't shop for my own groceries, don't worry about ordering takeout whenever I want kind of rich.
I could pay $20 for a salad. I could pay $16 for a smoothie. I could even drop $300 per person on a nice restaurant and not really be too stressed about it. Now, I can't afford a private chef yet, but I have opted for a high-end meal service that delivers dinners to my house. I have to work a lot. The difference is that per hour, my hours are much more financially valuable. George, Simon, and Tim all had to spend a lot of their hours cooking and cleaning and traveling around, but I can just pay to get a lot of that time back.
I could technically afford to spend $4,000 a month on health, but again, we estimate that it's a little bit lower, more like $2,500, which would still mean a totally different healthcare world.
I can go to any doctor, I can pay for a therapist out of pocket, I can easily afford to see a specialist for any kind of preventative care, physical therapy, elective surgeries, even stuff that isn't covered by my very good insurance. I can pay for it. I can pay out of pocket, and it's not too crazy for me. And even though I have a gym in my house because I converted one of the mini rooms into a gym, I actually pay for another nice gym membership at this luxury spa and gym so that I can use their hot tub and sauna. I also get in on their personal trainers who are really great. I recently signed up for this fancy doctor's office where I pay a monthly fee and I never have to wait more than 10 minutes in the waiting room. Remember, my time is extremely valuable.
And this is one reason why my life expectancy is way up here. I'm probably gonna live 7 or 8 years longer than George. Laundry, cell phone bills, Wi-Fi, these are all negligible costs for me. I'm left with at least $10,000, and it could be way more if I reduced some of these assumptions, like spending thousands of dollars every month on food for just me. So what do I do with all this leftover money?
Well, I do have a semi-complicated investment portfolio that I love to talk about. My money is in the stock market, 24/7, growing, compounding into more and more wealth. It allows my wealth to grow much faster than those who don't have extra money to invest. I go on vacations, though they do get interrupted by work. My job is very important. For international trips, I do sometimes splurge on business class tickets so I can lay down on the flight.
What's interesting though is that even at this crazy income bracket, people can still blow their money every month, trying to keep up with their expanding lifestyle. But let's be clear, they're living unrecognizable lives to the previous income tiers we talked about. So let's see what happens next.
All right, now let's see what happens when we turn this into $25 million a year, which is an amount of money that some people in this country actually make every year. Let's see what their budget looks like.
My name is Robert. You'll never hear about me because I am the owner of a highly successful national car wash chain. Or maybe I'm the CEO of Zillow or Chevron.
Or maybe I'm a pretty famous celebrity.
And I make $25 million a year. Noah was already in the top 1% of income earners, but now I am truly in the ranks of the global elite.
And we need to pause and talk about how rich people think about their wealth. At this point, we have to start to rethink money, because people at this income bracket think less about their yearly salary and more about the total value of all of the stuff they own, their net worth. Most of my pay is in stocks, not cash. I spend money knowing that I have all of these assets that I could sell if needed, even if it doesn't come to me in a paycheck every month. Which is actually really great because I'm not taxed on this stuff unless I sell it for cash. And even then, I'm taxed at like 15 to 20%, which means that in a lot of years, my tax rate will be less than Tim, who makes $100,000. I'm paying less of my income in taxes than he is. This is very good for my net worth. So let's see what I can buy.
Now, given my gargantuan income, I could technically afford this house. It has a pool, it's got this really cool statue, and this garden that looks like it's straight out of Princess Diaries.
I don't want to be a princess!
But because I'm planning to buy my summer house in Italy this year, I'm gonna go with something a little bit more modest, like this one. I really like this house. The doorknob in the shape of someone's hand, the animal print details, the golf room. I love this golf room.
I mean, what can I say? I'm Robert. I'm an eccentric boy.
This house has a pool, it's got a gym, it's got this wooden tub, which is something I never thought I needed, but I absolutely do.
What you'll start to see with this house and everything else in this income bracket is how it allows me to physically isolate myself from the concerns that most people have. I don't have to think about crime, homelessness, noise, pollution. I can live surrounded only by people who are wealthy like me. Getting around is really easy for me. I've got a couple of cars, I rotate driving them every once in a while, except for this one. This one I don't drive, because it's an antique and I just like to look at it. Oh, and did I mention I have a full-time driver? I pay him $51,000 a year. He whisks me around from important meeting to important meeting. I'm spending 2 times what George makes in a year to pay for this, and it's totally worth it because it saves me time. When I travel, he drives me right onto the runway, where I jump into a private jet. Now, I don't own this jet yet, but I do charter private flights. Like when I need to fly from Atlanta to New York, it costs me about $27,000 for this 2-hour flight. I can easily do that. 27 grand feels to me what $43 feels like to Simon. I'll pay that for a nice private jet. Now, I don't fly private all of the time. I do fly commercial if I'm going on vacation to Paris. I'll be flying first class, obviously. I have a separate security checkpoint, my own lounge, and when I get on the plane, I get one of those little cabins all to myself. By the way, this ticket cost me $31,000. When I get to Paris, I usually book the penthouse in one of my favorite hotels. I have hotel staff available at any moment. Do I cook? No, I do not cook. I enter grocery stores only when I feel like it would be fun to feel like a regular person for a moment.
Hey, Chef, do you want to cut this up for her?
And yet, magically, when I open my refrigerator, everything I need is in there. It's all been fully designed by my nutritionist, purchased by my house manager, prepared by my personal chef. And yes, you can see, I have a whole staff of people who help me manage my life. My house manager is really good at just making this all disappear. Like, the landscaping gets done, the pool gets cleaned, and a bunch of other stuff that I don't even know. I'm sure all of this costs a lot of money, but honestly, I've never even thought about it. I've got my friends over, and our personal chef is putting together a beautiful meal, and he's even doing the wine pairing tonight, selected from my collection of quirky cult wines in my temperature-controlled cellar. I don't pay attention to prices for food or wine, except when knowing the price of this bottle, for example, helps confirm how rare and special it is. I think we spent $16,000 on this bottle. Or this other one that I splurged on for $150,000. I go out to restaurants, but it's a little different than the rest of the world. I have connections that allow me to get into the private back room of whatever restaurant I want. Okay, this is insane. And while these costs are very feasible for someone who makes $25 million, not everyone who earns this much money lives like this. In fact, a lot of super rich people are incredibly frugal, making their high earnings that much more impactful because they can get rich much faster. But what we see with Robert is that you actually could spend this much money on food and housing given your income, and many do.
So in addition to my nutritionist and chef, I have a personal trainer and health coach who comes to my house every day and guides me through my workout. He even travels with me to keep me exercising while I'm on the road.
I have a private doctor who is on call, who comes to my house. I pay her 20 grand a year just to be on call. She's available, and she'll come do whatever I need, like a quick steroid shot to my bum knee before I play a game of tennis. My healthcare is mostly preventative. I get all the scans and tests and routines done to ensure that I'm in tip-top shape. I can afford any surgery or healthcare routine or procedure that I want. And last year, I fully replaced all of my front teeth with veneers. It only cost me $28,000. And remember, $28,000 for me is what it feels like when Tim spends $112, or what George feels like spending $28. Not nothing, but not a huge deal. Even after spending on all of this, I still have lots of money that my financial manager funnels into sophisticated investment portfolios that just keep on growing. Investing can be really fun for me at this point. I'll just take 30 grand here and there to buy collector's items that I'm into. A couple weeks ago, I paid $5,000 for this authentic World War II helmet. This piece of art cost me 50 grand, but it's a great investment because the artist is actually going to be the next big thing. So this stuff is fun, but it also contributes to my net worth because all of this retains and grows in value. And my clever accountant has recently mentioned that he found a way to occasionally sell this stuff and get a nice tax break on the profits.
Now listen, I make a meaningful difference in my community with philanthropy. Like, I'm donating $500,000 to my family foundation, which is promoting education in the city. Funneling money and assets into this foundation allows me to get some really nice tax breaks, helps me avoid capital gains tax, and it gives me a buzz of feeling like I'm a generous millionaire. I even donated a few $100,000 to my nephew's private school last year. They didn't really need the money, but now they're putting my name at the top of their donor list, which is like really great. And even after all of this, I've got tons of leftover income. I'm easily able to cover the mortgage on my secondary property in Lake Como. It's only $30,000 a month. And the views here are just chef's kiss. I mean, look at it. One of my favorite parts about this level of wealth is how much access I now have to obscure elite clubs, like this one in New York called Core. I had to pay 50 grand for an initiation fee and then $17,000 annually, but it allows me to rub shoulders with really important people. And yes, there are echelons above me that someday maybe I'll reach, but I'm still existing on a fully different plane than most every single person in the world. Almost every stressor that you can think of, I can pay away. And the ones that I can't pay away, like heartbreak, grief, and social anxiety, I won't be able to pay that away at any level of wealth. I am protected financially from just about any emergency that could occur in my life. And so long as I manage my finances responsibly, I will never experience life below this level of wealth.
The difference between these levels of income is kind of hard to fathom. If you're in the $25 million camp, you make more in 1 hour than George makes in 6 months. In just one 8-hour workday, you're making more than George makes in 4 years.
100 years ago, the divide between the rich and the poor was incredibly stark in this country. The top 1% would bring home 20% of all of the income. But then look what happened. We kind of fixed it. We taxed the super rich. The working class organized and rose up, fighting for fair pay. And by the 1980s, it was more like 10% of the income went to the top 1%. But watch what happens next. We're going back up, and we're leaving people like George in a trap. It's not hard to see why someone like George would have lost faith in our government and our institutions, and the concept of an American dream. The system is not working for George. Each cost leads to another cost, creating a poverty trap with no chance of getting out. Expensive housing far from work means a car. A car means maintenance and insurance and fuel, which means less money for food and healthcare. He makes too much for government assistance on any of this. How is George supposed to have the time, the money, or even the brain space to think about school or improving his skills? His social mobility is limited. We often think about America as this land of opportunity. If you work hard, you can move up. But the data shows us that that just isn't the case anymore. For someone like George, or for the tens of millions of Americans like him, the gap is getting wider, and it's getting harder to close. And that's bad. Not just bad because it's unfair, but it's bad for our economy. It's bad for our politics. And it's bad for the 44 million people who live in the richest country in the world but don't have enough food every day. The people who only have access to credit via predatory lenders. The people whose lives are rocked when they get a $25 overdraft fee, or who can't afford an oil change. It's time for the people in charge in this country to do what they did 100 years ago and reverse this curve before it becomes too late.
Top 1% hold nearly 10 times more wealth than the bottom 50% combined.
A staggering $5 trillion in wealth is set to be passed on without a dime of taxes. Oxfam is warning this accumulation of wealth in the hands of so few could exacerbate political divides, cause corruption, and...
I mean, my mind is a storm. I don't think most people would want to be me. They may think they would want to be me, but they don't. They don't know.
Is your storm a happy storm?
I've grown tired of hearing the name Elon Musk and not really understanding what's going on. Who is this guy? Where is he from? How has he built a huge business empire to become one of the richest people in the world? And what can we learn about his purchase of Twitter? So I've been going on a deep dive, finding everything I can about this guy, his upbringing, businesses he started, talking to people who have worked with him, who have worked for him. Many of these people want to remain anonymous for reasons you will soon understand. I've talked to people who love him, people who hate him, people who used to love him and now hate him.
If I were an employee at Twitter right now, I'd probably just do your job. Don't let them know you're mad.
So after a few months of reporting on this, I feel like I finally have a handle on who this guy is. I understand how he built his empire, how he treats the people around him, and the real reason I believe he bought Twitter.
Elon Musk put in an offer, an unsolicited bid to buy the social media platform.
$44 billion.
So let me show you the rise and rule of Elon Musk.
You're a super villain. That's what a super villain does. Yeah.
He's addicted to drama. He's addicted to risk. And whenever things seem to be going smoothly, he almost has a compulsion to stir things up.
Elon Musk was born in the summer of 1971 in South Africa. From a young age, he was bullied pretty relentlessly by kids at school for being scrawny and nerdy.
You know, bullied quite a lot. I got punched in the face many times.
Musk would later say that he's on the autism spectrum, though he was never diagnosed. It got really bad for young Elon. Like, one time.
When he got beaten up at school once and so bloodied he had to go to the hospital, the scars were actually worse when he came home, and his father made him stand in front of him and berated him for more than an hour, calling him stupid, saying it was his fault.
Stories like this make me sick to my stomach, and you realize that the trauma and scars from this kind of abuse, both physical and emotional, they don't go away easily. Speaking of his dad, there's a lot of rumors that Elon came from a rich dad who owned emerald mines in South Africa, and that he was set up to be successful because of family wealth. This isn't factually accurate. Elon's dad did import emeralds, but there wasn't a lot of money in this family.
He never owned a emerald mine. It was total bullshit.
If you want more detail on that, you can go check out our sources where we put the fact check for every one of the assertions in this video. Anyway, what Elon did have at a young age was a skill for computers and programming.
I taught myself how to program computers, mostly because I wanted to program games.
At the age of 12, he invented a video game.
Mom, do you remember when I was 12 and I created my own video game?
That he sold to a magazine for
$500.
It was his first business move in tech. His first interest in space.
Around 12 or 15, I had kind of an existential crisis, trying to figure out the meaning of life.
From an early age, Musk found meaning in the idea of the potential of humanity, what humans can do as a collective, how we as a species have somehow been able to work together to explore the meaning of the universe.
My motivation was that if we can expand the scope and scale of consciousness, maybe we can find out the meaning of life.
I mean, you hear this and it kind of sounds overly grand, kind of delusional, overly idealistic. But honestly, this is what motivates Musk from a very young age. And he doesn't bend on what he wants and what he's willing to do to achieve it. So he leaves South Africa when he's 18 and moves to Canada, and eventually ends up in Pennsylvania, where he goes to college and gets a degree in economics and physics. At the age of 24, he moves out to California to pursue a PhD at Stanford, but he never starts the program. Instead, he starts his first business. Okay, so I'm not going to go into the details of every one of Elon's companies because there are a lot. If you want a deep dive, read this very thick book. This was a foundational part of our reporting, and it details the play-by-play on all of these companies. For now, let me give you a quick summary of the businesses this guy built to become one of the richest men on the planet. His first company was called Zip2. He started it in 1995 with his brother, who seems to have an affinity for cowboy hats. His company provided maps and business directories for online newspapers. I know those words sound very strange to us now, but like back in 1995, it was a huge deal. It almost was like the precursor to what Google Maps is today, and it was very successful.
We helped bring online several hundred newspapers that previously were only in print.
It was acquired a few years later for $307 million, 22 million of those dollars going right into Elon's pocket. Suddenly, Elon is rich.
Receiving cash is cash. I mean, those are just a large number of Ben Franklin.
He uses the money to start another company called X.com. No, not that X.com. The first X.com, which you now know today as PayPal.
So this is an ATM. What we're going to do is transform the traditional banking industry.
It was basically an online bank, and it was revolutionary at the time. So much so that in 2002, eBay bought it for $1.5 billion. Elon got 180 million of those dollars, and now he's officially super rich.
There it is, gentlemen, the fastest car in the world.
So what to do with all of this money? The answer for Elon Musk was to try out the craziest ideas he could think of.
I have like about 180 million from PayPal. I hope, I'll allocate half of that to SpaceX and Tesla and Solar City. That should be fine. I'll have 90 million. That's lots. I thought our probability of success was less than 10%. It would be foolish to think anything else other than that.
Ever since he was a kid making video games about space, Elon has been motivated by this idea of humans expanding outside of Earth. Humans becoming a
multi-planet species. We would like to help make life multi-planetary.
The extension of life to multiple planets.
In the early 2000s, Tesla already existed. They were making electric cars, but they were kind of high-end, niche sports cars. Elon was really interested in this, so he came in as an investor and eventually became the CEO, with the vision of turning electric cars mainstream and ushering a whole new era of transportation. But these ideas were more expensive than he anticipated.
Things cost more and took longer than I thought, so I had a choice of either put the rest of the money in or the companies are going to die.
His rockets kept blowing up. His electric cars were devilishly complicated to manufacture. But Elon developed this addiction to risk and intensity that kept him pushing forward despite these challenges. Tesla reinvented how cars were made, thanks to innovative technology in manufacturing, really clever engineering, and a waterfall of government subsidies. He was able to skyrocket Tesla into one of the most valuable companies in the world, overtaking every other car company by a long shot in just a few years. And this company was weird. It wasn't obeying all the rules. Like, there was almost no official marketing campaign. And Elon decided to make all of his technology open source. The patents were not copyrighted. Anyone could see them and use them, with the hope that the market for electric vehicles would take off, and that the world would more quickly move away from the use of fossil fuels, which would ultimately benefit Tesla.
So if somebody comes and makes a better electric car than Tesla, and it's so much better than ours that we can't sell our cars and we go bankrupt, I still think that's a good thing for the world.
These were bold, crazy moves, but they were totally working. Meanwhile, Elon's space company was about to go out of business.
For SpaceX, the first 3 launches failed. Just barely able to scrape together enough parts and money to do the 4th launch.
And then, after 6 years and 6 months of stress and intensity, Elon's dreams of going to space started to come true. I'm going to explain a little bit more about how he did all of this, but the big deal about SpaceX is that they created a reusable rocket. Every other rocket is disposable. You can only use it once, and it's very expensive. But Elon proved that you could use a rocket and safely land it back down onto the surface of Earth, and then use it again. Soon, SpaceX would be carrying NASA astronauts and supplies to the International Space Station, launching military satellites into space for the Pentagon, launching dozens of satellites up into space for commercial use, and even launching the first ever private space flight for tourism. Space travel was officially reinvented.
I think we're at the dawn of a new era, and it's a reason for people to be excited and inspired to be human.
Okay, but what's crazy is that during all of this, Elon is also launching a bunch of other companies, like the Boring Company, which is trying to revolutionize traffic and transportation by building smarter tunnels. Oh my god, it just hit me that it's boring, like boring into the side of a mountain. Oh my god, that just hit me right now. This company also turned into like a blank canvas for Elon Musk to play out all of his childish, silly ideas, like selling a flamethrower or this perfume that smells like singed human hair. And yes, Musk uses his businesses as kind of a way to troll humanity while also trying to save humanity. It's this behavior that a lot of people find refreshing and ends up getting a lot of attention and becoming a marketing tool for all of his companies. He starts building Neuralink, which is designing a way for humans to control computers with their brains, which is already having some initial successes. And now that Elon's company can easily go to space, he starts sending up these small satellites, 6,000 of them, that are orbiting the Earth, and he starts providing internet to remote places, arguably changing the course of the war in Ukraine by providing Ukrainian soldiers with internet during the initial invasion from Russia. Though that's gotten more complicated in recent months as Russian soldiers have started to use Starlink, and it's a whole other rabbit hole. Okay, but we're not done yet with Elon's companies. He also co-founded OpenAI way back in 2015, who went on to make ChatGPT. He later left the company over disagreements, and then has recently started his own AI company called, you guessed it, XAI. Yes, the guy loves the letter X. It's literally the name of several of his companies and one of his children. Each one of these ventures points back to Elon's childish idealism, this grand vision of testing the limits of what humans can do by pushing our understanding of physics and working together to do crazy, amazing things. But then, after building all of these companies that are focused on pushing the physical limits of human potential, Elon in recent years has set his sights on reshaping another industry.
Tonight, the richest man in the world is hunting for more.
Put in an offer of almost $44 billion to buy Twitter.
All of Twitter. Is this all a troll or is this very real?
Elon Musk has been portrayed as both a reckless, unethical billionaire, as well as a visionary who is changing the world for the better. And what you think about him probably comes from what you read about him. And what you read about him was probably served to you by an algorithm. This is how our media landscape works these days. And it's getting us deeper and deeper into trouble, which is a major theme in this video, but it's also in line with the sponsor of today's video, which is Ground News. Ground News is a platform that I've been using to navigate this problem. To find bias distribution, but they also
Ini
have
kok
a tool
efeknya
that
semua
rates
nggak
how
kerender apa
factual an
grafiknya?
article
Sengaja
is.
bang,
And
biar
my
lebih
favorite,
smooth.
they have this blind spot detector that pays attention to the articles that you tend to read and presents you
Soalnya
with
kalau
stuff that might
lu
be
main
outside
kelas
of your
yang butuh
comfort zone,
FPS
but that you
tinggi
probably need to see to be
dan
a
lu mau
balanced
performance,
This is
lu
a really
butuh
cool
grafiknya
tool. I'm
rendah.
very glad they exist. I'm really glad they're sponsoring today's video. If you want to
Doesn't
try this out
matter
for yourself,
kalau
go
lu
to Ground
punya
News.com/Harris,
rigs itu
where you'll get
kuat
40%
seperti
off
4090
advantage
atau
plans,
gimana
unlimited
gitu.
access to all of these features.
It's still a fact.
I use Ground News. I think it's really important.
Karena
in
beda
today's media
beda bang.
landscape. I'm grateful that they
Kayak
sponsored
gimana
today's
ya?
video. With that, let's dive back into the story of Elon Musk.
Makin kecil grafik lu, makin gede FPS lu, makin gede damage.
Hunting for more.
Okay, so we're getting into this. Why did Elon
Makanya gue
buy
sampai
Twitter
pakai
with
inspektor
Elon?
buat ngeratain semua
What I learned
tirainya.
about Elon Musk.
Jadi gue nggak gitu liatin tumbuhannya gimana gitu.
With him, people have worked under him. There's a few key lessons that I've taken away from all of these conversations we've had with
Dan semuanya gue
people
jadiin
doing
lowest.
research on him. I will not
Buat
be quoting
PvP,
them
buat PvE,
directly
semua
because
jadiin
most of them
lowest.
ask to remain
Soalnya kalau lu mau ambil gambar kayak screenshot dan lain-lain dan mau enjoy the game,
over and over again
you can
is
play in
how
remastered,
obsessed Elon
high
Musk
quality,
is with the details
etc.
of what his companies are
Tapi
building.
so far kalau gue grinding, gue apa namanya, gue PvP, semua gue pakai lowest optimal.
One source I
FPS-nya lebih stabil,
estimates that he spends 90%
input lu bisa lebih banyak juga.
With a whiteboard out, looking at code with engineers.
BDO dari dulu emang kayak gitu bang, dia itu bukan ke limit ke GPU sih, dia lebih ke CPU. Jadi makin bagus CPU lu, makin bagus lu performa di game-nya. Juga kalau sebenarnya kalau buat GPU ini sebenarnya 1080 Ti itu udah cukup. Yang beratnya itu di CPU semua, renderingnya semuanya itu pakai CPU soalnya ini CPU ini apa intensif daripada GPU.
I can tell you it was very weird going to the Russian rocket forces and saying I'd like to buy 2 of your biggest rockets. They thought I was crazy.
Dibilang pay to win juga enggak sih? Setiap tahun juga orang upgrade komputer pasti. Dan harganya juga makin murah lama-lama.
Elon makes this list of every component he can think of needed to build a rocket. And then he put in the estimated price for just the materials and the components. What he found is that the prices
Spek PC sangat mempengaruhi. Spek PC-nya yang paling penting adalah CPU. GPU-nya mah 1080, 2060, 3060 cukup. Ini gue cuma pakai 3060 Ti ya. Gue nggak upgrade ke 4090. Tapi gue punya prosesor 10700K kok nggak salah.
Of all of the rocket components.
Nanti mau upgrade lagi kalau pas timingnya.
I heard story after story like this. Elon showing up, talking to some low-level engineer, working on some very specific problem and interrogating it until he found the most efficient answer. Oh, and this wasn't about him being collaborative or inclusive.
Kalau lu ngelihat video kayak misalnya orang montage, banyakan tuh pakai loss optimal di video.
So that he can find the most efficient way to build something.
Karena mereka bisa input lebih banyak dan nggak nge-lag.
He'll show up, he'll question everything, and then he'll tell people that a 6-month timeline needs to be condensed down into 90 days.
Bisa dibilang lah, lu 5% lebih cepat lah daripada inputnya daripada orang lain.
And then everyone makes it happen. Which gets me to number 4.
Dan 5% itu huge sih kalau di Black Desert.
Idealism and vision for the future has attracted a lot of really
5% itu bisa menentukan lu bisa nge-kill tuh orang dengan cepat atau tidak.
To reinvent transportation or take humans to Mars. They're the ones.
Pas Covid gue masih ingat main video pakai Athlon tuh harga spare PC pas mahal-mahalnya. Berapa tahun baru mulai normal lagi ya.
They are the ingredients.
Sekarang udah mulai normal lagi.
Reinvent entire industries. But this isn't the full picture. Everyone I talk to.
Ya kalau video cuman CPU intensif sih. Sebenarnya kalau lu upgrade 4090 tapi kalau CPU lu makin sampai juga performa juga sampai. Ya sama lah performanya kayak FPS game. FPS game itu lebih ke CPU daripada GPU. Kayak contoh misalnya CS2 atau CS2. Lu mau FPS-nya tinggi, lu butuh monitor dengan bitrate tinggi sama CPU-nya yang bagus. GPU nggak gitu masalah.
And I myself identify as being on some part of the spectrum. And so listening to hours of Musk, I see moments that to most people might look like him being mean-hearted and arrogant and extreme and even cruel, but to me feel more like him being unaware or perhaps unwilling to play by the rules of social norms. Okay,
kalau gua kan emang orangnya min-max kalau grinding. Gua mau
I need to make one thing
as high as possible and my earning min-max. Jadi ya gua mainnya di lowest kalau buat grinding. Tapi kalau misalnya kalau buat kayak roleplay yang lain, mau nyantai lah, mau life skill yang lain, gua pakai remaster. FPS differentnya itu memang huge sih.
Aggressive bullying, coercion, unethical business practices.
Bisa dibilang kalau remaster gue paling cuma dapat 60-80 FPS dan kalau ini gue dapat sekitar 120-140 FPS.
My point is that there's some empathy that is warranted here. It can be a blurry line.
Karena monitor gue cuma 144 jadi gue nggak bisa lebih.
Something we'll talk about more in a little bit. But for now, let's get back to our list. These 5 things that are the big takeaways on how Musk operates and how he's built his empire. And let's look at where this goes.
Sebenarnya GPU abang itu nggak masalah sih, paling CPU doang.
Tesla reaching $1 trillion.
Tapi kalau bisa sih dua-duanya sih balance. Kalau bisa sih dua-dua balance. Jadi nggak ada yang bottleneck jatuhnya.
These successes has skyrocketed Musk to become the world's richest man, according to Forbes billionaire tracker. But don't be fooled. For Musk, this actually isn't an ideal situation. Musk's biographer, Walter Isaacson, wrote this amazing book that details all of this private communication that really gives us an inside look into the psychology of Musk during this time. And he documents
dan
this
kalau bisa sih sebenarnya CPU-nya lebih bagus daripada GPU.
The director of operations at one of his
ini untuk video doang ya, bukan game lain.
Elon's twins, and Elon in a text that read, "You don't have to be in a state of
paling standar sih kalau rata-rata orang sih sekarang rata-rata pakai RTX sekitar 3060 ya.
And he replied 3070. It's a part of his default setting.
Performa. Dan paling itunya Ryzen 7, Ryzen 9.
And now he felt at a loss at what to do.
Kalau Intel i7
were unnerving for him.
10.000 ke
atas. The guy is addicted to conflict and crisis and tension and drama. And being the world's richest man with all these successes was uncomfortable. He needed a new storm to throw himself into. And so he chose the storm of all storms. At the end of 2022, he buys Twitter for $44 billion. In his offer letter, he tells us why he's doing it. He believes that Twitter has the potential to be
CPU is the most important
free
sih kalau
speech around the globe, and that free speech is a societal imperative for a functioning democracy. And right away, Musk applies his playbook to the
Bang Mini minta saran server yang wangi dropnya. Ke gue ya sharein dia. Gue 2 jam dapat 11 devouring 2 jam. Wangi banget.
Twitter employees are being laid off. Locked out of their work email accounts, Twitter has fired half of its 7,500.
Gue baru 2 jam, udah 11 devouring.
I thought a lot about how to talk about Musk's foray into Twitter, because it is in the news right now, it is shaping the way that we receive and talk about information, and there's a lot of hot takes out there. What I decided to do here is to try to give the most earnest understanding as to Musk's motive. Why does he do this? What does he want from it? And what is he doing to reshape Twitter around this vision?
What was it ultimately that led you to make the decision to do it?
Somewhat melodramatic, but I was worried about that it was having a corrosive effect on civilization.
So first and foremost, free speech is like the thing he says over and over.
Free speech is free speech.
Free speech is the only way that humans are going to thrive, and because Musk's main mission is the advancement of human civilization, he must buy Twitter and make it the free speech platform. The platform where we have perhaps the most important conversations in the world. He says this over and over, like in this tweet where he says, "This is a battle for the future of civilization.
Oh, dapat
If
lagi
free
12.
speech is lost, even in America, tyranny is all that lies ahead." So that's number one
12,
on what he says his motives are.
I think part of it is that it's where it was located.
Bisa dibilang kalau dari devouring doang ya 2 jam ini gue udah 2,5 B. Tambah sampan, tambah 1,4 B sama dengan 3,9 B.
More far left than San Francisco Berkeley.
Twitter's headquarters is located right here in downtown San Francisco.
Ya 4 B lah kalau lu jual sama kapras sama batu-batu dan lain-lain. 4 B 2 jam. 1 jam 2 B lah.
That was then harnessed by the far left, who could not themselves create the weapon, but happened to be co-located where the technologists were.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Musk believes that Twitter being in the heart of a liberal city means that the engineers and leaders deciding what gets elevated and suppressed on Twitter are infected with the politics of the liberal city, and so they're more likely to elevate their ideology. A megaphone, an information weapon. That's his argument. I have a couple issues with the argument and its logical underpinning, but again, this is about what Elon Musk says as his motivation for buying Twitter. And number 3, the government is censoring Twitter, and Twitter is letting them.
Twitter was simply an arm of the government, you know, a state publication is the way to think of old Twitter. It's a state publication.
All right, this is our list. We're gonna get to each of these and like try to understand them all, but like, is anyone else wondering what happened here? It feels like the story
went from kalau gue itu nggak masalah, yang penting kan liquidity-nya cepet laku. Masalahnya kalau debo sebenarnya oke sih price-nya dan orang banyak yang mau, tapi rarity-nya kan lumayan langka. Dan kalau misalnya nggak ada event drop, rate itu nggak worth it buat grinding debo di S4S. Kecuali lu sabar orangnya. Kalau gue sih orang kan nggak sabar. Kalau misalnya 5 jam gue nggak dapet 5 debo, itu nggak profit.
What happened? I actually never got to the bottom.
Mendingan gue dapat at least 1 jam 3 sampai 4 hunger daripada 1 debo.
Was never answered for me during this reporting. We do know this pivot happened sometime in 2020. Why did Musk shift to obsessing over this? The answer to that probably lies somewhere in Elon Musk's brain, and it is not ethical or useful for me to try to opine on his mental health or what is going on in his brain. So let's stick to the facts. Here is the logical framework that Elon Musk.
Plus gue grindingnya pakai drop baru kan Harmony. Mahal juga. Jadi cost-nya itu berasa.
After firing most of the employees and
Padahal dulu orang
changing the name to his favorite letter, he gets to
Daro
work
debo
on free
sehari
speech.
belum
He
tentu
lets
ngedrop.
big accounts that
Iya.
were previously banned back onto the platform, including
Betul
former
sekali.
President Donald Trump, comedian Kathy Griffin, lawmaker Marjorie Taylor Greene, Jordan Peterson. Within a few months, he posts this tweet around the Super Bowl, and he notices that this tweet gets less engagement than the tweet by President Joe Biden.
Dulu nyari debo itu sakit lah,
Elon
Bang.
does not like this. He calls an urgent meeting.
Gue nyari
and tasks
earring gue
80
paling sakit.
engineers to quickly rebuild a version of the
Soalnya
algorithm
earring kan
that
dulu
will
cuma
allow
dari
his
Olun.
tweets to be artificially boosted by a factor
Dulun
of 1,000.
maksudnya.
I was kind of skeptical on how sensational it was reported, but through my conversations confirmed that this actually went down. Like the old Twitter was not
Dan gue
built to
dapetnya
artificially
salah.
boost one account.
Anggap
And
aja
Elon,
gue
the free
per hari
speech guy,
grinding
was
6
like,
jam. Paling cuma
I
dapat
need you to boost my account because
satu
it's
apa
not getting
dua
as much
gitu.
attention as the president.
Kalau hoki 2 lah.
And the 80 engineers did.
Dan
So, a few
lu
months
tahu
after
sendiri
Biden,
lah kalau lu grinding
Elon
deki
now
Olun
has
itu ngantuk
super
banget.
algorithmic power. And he
Itu
uses
benar-benar
it
harus
to
dibantu
start
dengan
to
kopi.
amplify
Kalau nggak ada kopi
certain
sulit.
people.
Kayak sekarang
So I know what you're thinking.
lagi
Johnny, you just
detox
disagree
kopi
with
nih,
these
nggak
people, and
minum
so you
kopi.
think that it's bad that Elon let them on, but really, free speech is about letting everyone talk. Yes, absolutely.
Ya,
that
paling
is
gue cuma
true.
grinding 4 jam
And
doang.
yet, Elon uses an
Tadi sebenarnya jam pertama udah
artificially
ngantuk,
amplified
tapi dapat
voice
devouringnya
to
banyak, ya udah gue
very
lanjut.
specific type of voice on Twitter to amplify ideas, extreme ideas, harmful ideas, not just to liberals in San Francisco, but
Kalau
ideas
tak kalau
that
cari
we
dia
as
apalagi yang lawan
humanity
hantu di hutan
recognize
Kama.
are bad ideas, and now
Ya,
someone with a massive megaphone
udah nggak
has
gitu
control
sih
on
di
how big
sana.
those ideas can be.
Esores.
Even Bill Maher, the
Iya.
Elon fanboy.
Ya dulu gue juga pikirnya begitu, Bang, tapi mau sampai kapan lu stuck APDHP?
Even he could not understand why Elon was doing
Emang
it.
sih, mungkin lebih murah kalau lu beli langsung dari market ya, kayak pennya cuma 300 B. Tapi gue rasanya ini apa? Kalau itu bukan gue yang buat, gue nggak mau pakai.
Conspiracies and misinformation to a lot of people. When asked why Elon didn't let him go
Makanya
back,
semua barang
he
gue
said no, saying that
getok
he had
sendiri.
no mercy for anyone who would use the
Gue
death
cuma
of
beli
children
tabnya aja dari
for
market,
gain,
terus gue getok
politics,
sendiri.
or fame. He did eventually reinstate Alex Jones after running a poll, but you start to see that he'll reinstate anyone unless he personally takes issue with their views or what they said. What's puzzling to me is that this isn't free speech absolutism. It's not say anything you want.
Sensasi,
Musk's
ya
new
sensasinya
Twitter
berbeda.
then starts
Kayak
banning
gimana ya?
and
Lu
suppressing
pakai
Substack.
barang orang
Substack's the place where independent
jatuhnya lah,
journalists write.
bukan barang
Musk
lu
made the
sendiri yang lu
change where
bikin.
You can't comment or like on anything that has a Substack article, and you can't embed tweets
Kalau
in
lu
your Substack
pakai
article.
barang
That doesn't feel
lu
like
sendiri yang lu
free speech
getok,
to me. Musk
ada
then
sensasi
decides
pride-nya
that
lah.
The word cisgender is a slur
tap
on
this,
Twitter
tap
and
that.
threatens to ban people who use it too much. Is that free speech? He then starts banning journalists who criticize.
Tapi
him.
different
Though
lah
he did
orang ke orang lah.
reinstate
Kalau gue kan
two of
emang
them
enjoy
after a
grinding.
vote.
Jadi
And
kalau
then
gue,
starts
jadi gue
suing
sendiri udah tahu
video
kalau misalnya gue
watchdog
gagal
organizations,
tabnya,
like the Center for
gue bakal
Countering
grinding
Digital
lagi.
Hate,
Kalau gue
trying
jadi
to
pun,
silence
gue masih
them
grinding
for
lagi.
criticizing the new Twitter. Musk, of course, lost with the verdict coming out saying that this lawsuit was basically about trying to silence criticism and deter others from criticizing his company.
He's someone who is willing to use his enormous wealth and power to silence people.
Like, this is such clear anti-free speech behavior. When Twitter users organized a protest against making users pay for a blue check mark, he banned that account. And this is what's so mind-bending.
Oh,
I
dulu
swear
kalau
he's
nggak kreatif
trolling
sendiri
us.
gengsi,
He
cuma
says
nggak
that he's
bisa
obsessed with
berhenti.
free speech, but then immediately
Dari
after
adiksi
taking
gacha.
over Twitter, he demonstrates an extreme hypocrisy for that very point. And I
Adiksi
secretly
gacha
think he's
maksudnya
doing that so
game
that we are
game lain apa game video?
I don't think it was ever about free speech. I also think that when he posts political propaganda ads, like this
Nggak tahu sih,
conspiracy
kalau gue
video
sih emang
that
main
says
dari
that
game sebelumnya,
Democrats
kalau
are letting
itu item
immigrants
bukan made dari
to
gue sih
turn
gue nggak
America
mau
into
main.
single party rule and has almost 100
Video.
million
Oh.
views. I think he's doing that.
Kalau gue
Not
sih
because
as a
he
rule of
agrees
thumb
with
sih
this
selalu,
factless
kalau
piece of
misalnya lu mau
propaganda,
nempa dan
but
mau
because
upgrade
he
gear lu,
loves to rile people
jangan
up.
pakai gear lu yang
And
sekarang lu
either way,
pakai.
I
Misalnya
don't
gear gue 650
Either
GS nih,
way,
gue mau
he
upgrade
has
ke
built a
Pendisto
platform
lah
that
mungkin.
gives him the biggest megaphone
Gue harus beli
and
tab
suppresses
disto,
people
gue nggak mau
who
pakai
criticize him.
tab disto yang
That
gue
is
pakai terus gue
not
getok,
free
enak
speech.
aja.
Okay, but
Kalau
let's
pecah,
move on, because free speech was
rugi.
just one of
Grindingnya
his
makin
motives.
lama lagi,
What
ya
about
kali.
this argument that
Nggak lah,
Twitter is
pinter-pinter
infected
lah.
with liberal ideology because it is based in San Francisco? Luckily, we have data.
This was a great study, very thorough. Algorithmic amplification of politics on Twitter. It's a study from before Elon took over. They conducted a long-running, massive-scale randomized experiment where they looked at a huge number of tweets from 7 countries. And they found that in 6 out of the 7
hafal
countries,
total semua getokan gua
the mainstream
yang jadi dan
political
gagal.
right enjoys a higher
Dan paling sakit
algorithmic
kalau gua sih
amplification
di
than the mainstream
Awakening
political
Blackstar.
left. They saw this
Gue
over
pakai
and over.
cron
Oh, and
dari
also,
awal
really
sampai
interesting
sekitar
side they found that Twitter actually doesn't amplify far
103
left
tab
or
kalau nggak
far
salah.
right political groups
Terus
more than
sisanya itu gue
moderate,
beli Blackstar
which is a myth
7
that
biji
I believed until
tab
I read this study.
raw
But the
tab
whole
raw
point
tab
is
raw
that
tab raw tab
Twitter
sampai
did
jadi.
not have a liberal bias. If anything, it
Kalau
had
dia
a
turun, gue
conservative
langsung jual. Gue
bias.
nggak
This
peduli
study
lagi
very
value
robust
gue harus
proof of
ketok
that,
ketetnya.
despite Elon's theory
Karena it's a
that
waste of
Twitter
money
being in San
and
Francisco
time.
infected it with a liberal bias. Go to the sources and read the study for yourself if you want to poke into it. If there's anything wrong with it that I'm missing, please tell me. But it seems like pretty damn solid proof to me. Okay, but what about the last critique? And this is a big one. Musk believed that Twitter was being censored by governments, and Twitter was letting them do this. And guess what? That is actually true. Upon taking over Twitter, Musk cracked into all of the internal communications and found a bunch of emails that showed how Twitter had banned and suppressed information that it deemed harmful and dangerous, but that they did so sometimes with a political bias. You can see things like Biden's team asking Twitter to review these tweets that they didn't like. Yes, governments around the world can ask Twitter to take things down in their country that they think are breaking the law or that are harmful to national security. And this happened on both sides. The Trump White House asked Twitter to take things down as well. But this reporting did reveal what looked like a lot of left-leaning bias in censoring certain highly sensitive content that would be damaging to the left. The big example of this was this New York Post article about Hunter Biden's laptop. Twitter severely censored this,
Next
not
hour.
even letting people DM the link to each other, and making up a thin justification for it later. Now, content moderation, deciding what is harmful,
Kalau nempa ada
what
panah,
should be
gue
censored
ujung-ujungnya
and what
ngerolet.
shouldn't, is a really
Enggak, gue
difficult
sih enggak.
task. But for a lot of people, including myself,
Kalau gue
this
kalau panas,
crossed
gue main game
this
lain.
was not okay. Though I have to say that Hunter Biden New York Post article was the most sort of egregious.
Gue nggak bakal
one. A lot of the
panas
other
sih kalau
stuff in the
BDW.
Twitter files was not nearly
Soalnya gue udah
as
tahu
blatant, much more nuanced
dari
much more
awal.
complicated. The point is there should be transparency here, and I agree with Musk on that. Okay, but this is once again where we find some strange paradox that doesn't make any sense, which is that since Musk took over, government censorship on Twitter has gone up.
Twitter suspended multiple journalists from prominent outlets, including the Washington Post, the New York Times, and CNN.
Tonight, a number of high-profile journalists have been silenced.
Here are the number of takedown requests that governments around the world made.
Dulu gue malah lebih panas main game sebelum gue. Dulu gue main
And
Seal.
these are the ones that Twitter complied with.
Dulu gue kalau Seal kan benar-benar pay to win tuh. Semua item lu bisa beli dari player, bisa trade orang lain. Gue kalau misalnya ada barang baru keluar dari maintenance gitu, baru keluar di market, itu dalam satu hari itu harus jadi XG plus 12. Kalau nggak jadi XG plus 12, gue tetap harus gas itu sampai XG plus 12. Makanya satu hari gue kadang bisa habis 10 juta, 20 juta tanpa mikir. Nah ini masih mending lah.
Allowing to be censored on the platform is really sensitive stuff for free speech. Like, take Turkey for example. There was a Turkish election last year.
Ini lebih chill.
Gue
udah tau lah rasanya di game sebelumnya, jadi yang ini gue biasa aja.
Of a few people he didn't like, a Kurdish businessman, an investigative journalist.
If I don't get it, next time I will get it.
Clear, black and white political censorship.
Don't have to rush.
Like, make the guy who is criticizing me go away. And guess what? Musk's Twitter did it. They said yes. They banned the accounts and then said we didn't have a choice. They were going to shut down all of Twitter, so we had to do it. And then they patted themselves on the back.
Dulu gue di Blades of Destiny bang, gue di
and they're doing
official.
so much for battling government censorship and transparency on the platform. But guess what?
Kalau privat nggak main.
This same kind of thing happened before Musk ever
Karena
came
privat
and Twitter fought back.
Sebenarnya dulu privat main sih, cuman privat ini
the
apa?
government tried to do the same thing.
Dia
Censor posts
buka tutup jadi malas.
within the Turkish
Jadi
government.
kadang lu udah
They
invest
asked Twitter to take these
di
down,
satu
and Twitter said
akun,
no. They fired back
terus
that political speech is
seal-nya
among the
tutup,
most
terus dia buka
important
lagi
speech,
gitu. Jadi
especially
nggak
when it
enak lah.
concerns matters of
Kelihatannya.
possible
Jadi
corruption.
jatuhnya kayak
So,
ya
the
ladang
government
buat
shut down
petani
Twitter.
tapi
It was down for a
bagi
couple of
sultannya
weeks
di situ
while
jadi
they
nggak
battled
enak.
it out in court.
Lu nggak
And the
investnya.
Turkish government lost. Indeed,
It's
they
bullshit
lost
lah.
because they were trying to
Literally
censor
kayak money
political
laundry.
speech, and Twitter fought back. There's even more recent examples, like Wikipedia or Wokepedia, as Elon calls it, refusing to comply with the Turkish government's censorship requests, getting completely shut down for almost 3 years, only to have it be overturned in Turkish courts. A major win for free speech in Turkey, which is something that's in short supply lately. So like Wikipedia, Twitter can do this. They can say no to the Turkish government. If they're actually crusaders for free speech, and if they're actually against government censorship, they would have said no in 2023. Musk's Twitter did this in India too, when the Indian government asked Twitter to censor a bunch of journalists, including an entire BBC bureau and a documentary that was critical of the government and the president, and Twitter complied. Elon, where is your conviction for free speech? Where is your hate for government censorship in moments like this where it really, really matters? But for Elon Musk, he's got a lot of
Cuma
other things he
embel-embel
needs to think
private
about.
terbesar
He
di
needs to think
Indo.
about the market for Tesla.
Tapi kok masih banyak spend-spendnya sama perusahaan privat ini tuh. Ya
He needs to be thinking about where
kalau
Tesla
dari
factories might be set.
teman
The
gua
market for
sih
his
pembelaannya dia
cars.
bilang
This is a conflict of
nostalgia.
interest that gets in the way of
Jadi
his
misalnya
idealistic
dulu
vision for
pas
free
di zamannya
speech
dia
and
main,
his hate for government censorship.
dia tuh nggak bisa
Twitter
punya
used to
equip
have a page
bagus.
where they
Jadi
would
dia
publish
pelampiasannya
in
di
detail
privat
why
server
they
maupun
would take down
buka
any
tutup,
content they
yang
took
penting
down
dia
at
tetap
the
enjoy.
request of the government. And there's this research lab at Harvard that would aggregate all of this for the public.
Kalau
When
gue
our story
sih
producer Alex went to go look
defense-nya
for these
kalau
government
sekarang udah
requests
nggak
in
main
Turkey
game
and
itu lagi
India,
karena
she found
satu
that they no longer
itu
were
game
there. This page had gone
pay to
quiet.
win dan
So, she reached
ultimately
out to the Harvard lab
petani nggak bisa
and
ngelawan
got this
Sultan.
response.
Sulit.
Twitter stopped sharing this data starting
Karena
in
itu
April
gamenya tuh
2023.
tepuk sebelah
No
tangan
more
lah.
transparency
Jadi kalau
on
misalnya
government censorship. It looks like it's down to the
Sultannya
whims
udah
of
nge-spend,
one super rich
petani
dude.
nggak bisa ngelawan,
That
nggak
is
bisa
not
ngelawan.
free speech.
Petani ya hanyalah
That is the
petani gitu.
antithesis of what this guy
Jadi
said
ujungnya
he was
cuma
going to do.
Sultan lawan Sultan, jadi
So, no,
nggak ada
I don't think
equality,
Elon
jadi
Musk
nggak seru
is
game.
earnest about these three things
Gue
that
main
he said
total
were
udah
his motive
sekitar
for buying Twitter.
13 tahun,
In fact,
14
after
tahun
listening to
ya
all
sih.
of this, I'm having a hard time figuring out what Elon is earnest about at all, other than his belief that humans have the
Coba deh lu di
potential to
BDO,
do
lu
amazing
misalnya lu
things.
free to
I do
play
believe that in all of
dengan
this, that is the
benefit yang
one
ada
thing
sekarang,
that
lu udah
escapes
kasih
the
fanbase
system.
dan
And
lain-lain.
how he's
Lu
pursuing
masih
that
bisa kok
goal
ngelawan
in
700
recent
GS.
years is baffling,
Temen
confusing,
gua
and
730 GS,
quite
dia tendanya
harmful
masih tenda
for
pecel lele ya bro.
Twitter
Percaya
seems
nggak lu?
much more
Dia rata tab
like
debo.
a platform
Enggak deh, naiknya udah
where
jadi
he
pen.
can bully the people he doesn't like. He can feed his addiction to crisis and controversy.
Tendanya
while
masih
also
tenda pecel
showing
lele, dia nggak nge-spend
a
pearl sama
childish
sekali. Kalaupun ada
hypocrisy
pearl,
in
dia
his
spendnya langsung di
principles
kostum.
and values. But unlike his other ventures, which
Bisa dibilang
you can
literally
tell
dia emang
they're
free to
successful
play lah.
because they're physics. The rocket either goes up into space or it doesn't.
Tendanya
The
masih
car
tenda pecel
drives
lele.
or it doesn't. This new venture doesn't have a physical feedback loop that tells him if it's doing
Dengan
good
benefit
or
sekarang,
bad.
lu
Instead,
daily GBR aja udah
the
1,2 belu masa green.
precarious nature of information in the internet age. Something that is already in crisis and now is being chipped away at by one rich dude who gets off on crisis. And what blows my mind most is that in the process of all
Ya
of
cuman
this,
kalau mau spend berenang
Musk
kan
is
mending enak kalau
undermining
bisa
his
server
own
minimal
dream,
tahunan lah hidup.
his own
Ya
vision.
betul,
This
betul
is a
sekali.
sentiment I heard from the employees
Di video
and
kan pay to
colleagues of
progress
Elon
kan lebih
Musk.
tepatnya
They
biar
felt
nggak bypass
betrayed.
time. Yes.
Like this man pushed them to think differently, to do things that seemed impossible. All in the name
Bentar.
of his grand vision
Pay
of
to
what
progress
humanity
nggak
could,
juga
what we
sih.
could do as a civilization. And yet in recent years he seems to be sabotaging
Kalau
that
dibilang
very
pay to
vision,
progress sih nggak juga sih bang,
alienating the
jujur
people
ya.
and customers that he needs to bring this vision to life.
Misalnya
In
lu
my
beli
mind, Elon has
kostum dan lu
exchanged
jual
that
di
vision
market itu lu jatuhnya lebih rugi
controversy
sih daripada lu
and
grinding
division
1 jam.
that forces all of us to talk
Jadi
about
nggak bisa dibilang pay
Here
to
we are,
progress juga sih.
talking about it.
Tapi
Talking
juga
about,
BDU juga nggak bisa
part
dibilang
of
pay to win atau free to play sih. Emang bisa free
means
to play
that.
tapi dia nggak
And
pay
yet,
to win.
after all of this,
Pay to
defenders of
winnya
Elon
itu
will
hanya
continue to argue
sebagai satu
that
aspek, mungkin pet
only someone
atau
like
inventory
this
atau weight
could be the
limit,
one to
tomate
change
dan
the
lain-lain.
world.
Tapi kalau misalnya dalam satu hari lu ngarep lu bisa ngejar 750 GS itu kayaknya hampir mustahil sih. Kecuali kalau lu mungkin kayaknya kalau lu milioner juga kayaknya sulit tetap.
But I don't accept this way of thinking about Musk today. Maybe a couple years ago, but in recent years, Musk has shown it's his addiction to.
Kalau pay to win di BDO itu lebih bukan ke utility bang, quality of life. Quality of life maksud lu. Tenda, mate, pet.
And instead of saving civilization,
quality of life. Ya kalau dibilang kayak kostum dan lain-lain itu kan cuman lu nggak pakai kostum pun bisa kan. Itu cuman buat fashionnya doang. Quality of life. Value pack. Quality of life.
It's November 10th, 2008. Barack Obama just won an election, and he travels to the White House to meet with the outgoing president, George Bush. In that meeting, Bush told Obama about a top-secret weapon that the U.S. military had been developing with Israel since 2005.
Dia nggak bikin gameplay lo atau grinding lo itu jadinya lebih nyaman. Coba kalau lo nggak ada tenda pay, nggak ada tenda pay to win, nggak ada tenda ini, napart. Lu beberapa kali sekali lo harus balik ke kota repair.
Or with enough spinning to be used in a nuclear weapon. But this secret weapon wasn't a missile.
Lu grinding di tempat kayak misalnya underwater atau Akman, kan kuda nggak bisa masuk tuh, lu butuh mate.
Less than a megabyte in size. 150,000 lines of pristine code. This is the weapon that the president had to tell Obama about.
Weak limit ya, you know lah.
Planted in Iran, where it spread throughout the whole country. But it didn't do anything. It lay dormant until it found its way onto a flash drive that was then plugged in at this underground nuclear facility.
Ya kalau video pay to win mungkin itu di later stage. Misalnya kalau lu emang emergency lu butuh cron ya lu beli kostum lu jadi cron. Kayak gua pas ngetok debo gua itu kan gua cuman gesek kalau ada step up event, literally free crons, nggak free sih, lu bayar, tapi ya jatuhnya lebih banyak aja.
Over time, these subtle manipulations destroyed these centrifuges. This was one of several weapons that the U.S. had planted in Iran.
Itu kalau yang di Amerika, ya betul, itu yang di Amerika. Kalau yang di NA server, itu nggak bisa dibilang gimana ya. Income mereka lebih gede bang, jadi value di gamenya juga bisa dibilang rata-rata. Anggap aja dia punya income $4.000 per bulan, dia spend $100-200 di game per bulan juga itu kayak anggap aja dia beli ketoprak.
The code that sabotaged the nuclear facility was eventually discovered and named after some of the elements that were inside of these many lines of code. .stub or MRX.net. They called it Stuxnet. Now this weapon did slow down Iran's progress at first, but it didn't stop them. But what this did do was showcase a new style of war. The use of quiet weapons in the form of a tiny textile that could self-replicate and wreak actual
semua yang ada di Pearl Shop sekarang itu rata-rata quality of life.
Cyber warfare.
Kron lah, kron murah, LS, lagi.
Let me show you how it works.
Kostum kapal, buat naikin speed sedikit.
Before Stuxnet, most cyber warfare was pretty basic. Like in the 80s, you had this situation where an East German hacker broke into some military computers in the US looking for secrets for the FSB, which was like the Soviet spy agency. Or more recently, like in 2007, where Russian hackers attacked a bunch of Estonian websites in the financial, government, and media sectors, shutting them down as retaliation against Estonia deciding to relocate a Soviet monument. These were cyber attacks, but they were pretty weak and unsophisticated, especially compared to what was soon to come. So we live in a weird time. Our information is less secure than ever. And now my phone and my email and my physical mailbox are inundated with stuff I don't want to see. I feel like my information is just leaked out to anyone and everyone who wants it. And this, of course, is a part of today's video, but it also has to do with the sponsor of today's video, which is Incogni. Incogni is a platform that allows you to get yourself off of the lists that data brokers use to get your information. It's really cumbersome and time-consuming to go through the process to be taken off these lists. Companies make it intentionally hard at times. So what you do is
sampai SMH dinner.
give them permission to act on your behalf to go out and request
konten paling banyak SMA yang rem dari belakang.
There's a link in my description. It is incogni.com/JohnnyHarris. When you click the link, it helps support the channel. You get 60% off when you sign up for the annual plan. The annual plan allows Incogni to month after month go and strip you off of these lists so that you can
semenjak SMH dinner ya adalah masa kejayaan dan masa jeleknya. Tiba-tiba silver jadi seret. Terus keluarlah Elvia. Terus udah mulai berasa tuh per jam 1B. Sekarang udah mulai berasa 1,5B, 2B.
We have to remember that in the early 2000s, most of the world wasn't built off of the
Tapi paling berasa
internet
sih sekarang.
Internet
Silver itu
speeds were
kayak
getting good.
bisa dibilang
Software
nggak
was
begitu
getting
berarti lah.
sophisticated. And computers and their software were
Tetap
becoming the
berarti
foundation
sih
to
kalau lu
many
mau
big
nempa, tapi
invisible industries like
nggak begitu
shipping,
berarti karena lu
finance,
dapetnya
and
cepat.
energy.
1 jam,
And
1
crucially,
jam 2
hackers who had grown up on the internet were getting really good at finding vulnerabilities
dan
in these
upgrade.
systems.
Kalau lu udah GS segua, upgrade-nya makin mahal.
Now, how those hackers ended up selling their
Gua kan
secrets
kurang
to the
2
US
whaling.
government
Kalau gua
in
udah
the
ada 2
name of
whaling, gua
making
771
cyber
guys.
weapons is the next part of the story.
Belum nanti preparation buat
But
software
first,
weapon.
a quick word on
Gua harus
software.
grinding berapa lama lagi
This
ya?
thing that runs our modern life that is mostly
Coba PA
invisible,
naikin silver
but
ke
that is
3B per
endlessly
jam.
important. That ensures that you
Atau
have
4B
electricity
ya.
and that you can access your bank account and do your job. All of this is made possible because of something that looks very simple. Lines and lines of code. They're just basically lists of instructions on how a system should run, what it should do in every circumstance, and who has access to what. But because more and more of the world is run on software that contains sensitive information like your social security number or bank account number, whatever, developers build their software like a castle.
PA mau kita kayak move to debo daripada pakai aksesori
So this
biasa.
is our software castle. It has walls and locked
Ya,
doors
ada
that
wallnya
only
sih
authorized
kalau di
users are
sini.
allowed to get into. But
Kalau debo,
inevitably, because
wallnya
it's a
itu
big, complex
ya
castle,
kron.
the builders of this castle, on accident, left little holes, little vulnerabilities, weak spots, secret doors that if an intruder could find, would allow them to get in, where they can steal things, or even take control of parts of the castle.
Bang,
They can
spam
lock
base
the
boring
owner
dong.
out, and only
Kalau
give them
drop
access in
bang,
exchange
aku
for money.
udah
Or
spam
they
bang.
could just leave little
Karena
time
tiap kali
bombs
aku udah dapat limbo,
will
aku
blow up
langsung,
later.
wih origin,
Almost
lumayan.
all software
1B.
has some kind of vulnerability that would allow a hacker to get in and control things. But the
Kalau aku
worst
dapat
kind,
limbo,
arguably,
biasanya
and
langsung
the
ku
nightmare
jual.
scenario for software developers is the 0 day. It's called a 0 day exploit because by the time the intruder gets into the software castle, the developers had known about this for 0
masih
days.
fun,
Meaning
kira
they
apa yang
didn't
rubah
know, they
total
were
konten.
unaware. They were blindsided by this
Yeah.
attack. There was a hole in their castle that somebody found, and now they're screwed.
Kontennya jadi pure PvE.
Now, once a hacker
Sebenarnya
gets in,
gue kurang
developers
suka
often
dengan
know that
konsep
there's a vulnerability.
pure PvE.
They can work on
Oh,
patching
gue
it,
suka
but that
PvE.
takes time. And then of course, they have to get the
Esensinya
users
kurang
to
aja. Kalau dulu kan
update their
enak.
software in order
Lu
for
nggak
that
seneng
patch
dikit,
to
lu langsung
update.
deklar.
And we all know how kind of
PvP.
annoying that is. A 0 day exploit is a software developer's
Sekarang kalau lu
nightmare,
mau deklar, lu harus
which
minta
in
izin
turn
dulu.
makes it a hacker's dream. Some hackers will spend their time looking for 0 day exploits in really powerful software, like the software that runs your iPhone, or Google Chrome, or Windows operating systems, or a million other
Yang
pieces
PO
of
juga
software
dah
that run our
dikit.
world. Some are interested in doing this so that they can get money or passwords.
Gua kayak minggu ini belum dapat
Others
libur
are
ya.
interested in gaining control of
Minggu ini gua belum dapat
underground
limbo
nuclear
sama
facilities
sekali.
and electricity grids. That would be the government. Okay, so let's say you're a really sophisticated hacker and you have somehow found a zero-day exploit for an Apple iPhone iOS. You can get into someone's iPhone and control it. That's a really valuable thing. You now have
Gimana tuh, udah dapat merchant ring belum? S4S.
With that information.
Udah gue bocorin servernya, enak ke
You
sini.
could go right to Apple and you could give it
Gacor
to
gue.
them. And they will pay you handsomely. Right now, they will pay you $1 million in exchange for a zero-day exploit.
Gue dulu suka SMA bisa karamin kapal koran di tangan baru gue rasa enak sekali.
Enak
bang, tapi sekarang dipanis kan. Apa karma laut, pulihnya lama. Sama sih karma darat juga, pulihnya lama juga. Kalau akun gue minus 300.000 karma, itu kalau mau recovery itu almost take half a day sih. Dipilahku half a day. Lama banget.
Totally above board. We'll call this the white market. But you could also sell it on the black market to criminals who want to use these exploits to make money, which happens. Like in 2016,
15 menit lagi baru pindah server. Ya kali bang, kira udah dari tadi pindah sini.
Were able to into the central bank of the country of Bangladesh. They were able to make all these fraudulent requests and like hijack the SWIFT system that transfers all the money. And in the end, they were able to get $81 million transferred to their bank account in the Philippines. Their end goal was to get closer to $1 billion, but because of a typo in one of their fraudulent requests, they got caught and it got shut down. But the point is that there's a black market for 0 days because there's a lot of money to be made if you can hack into a financial system. But you also have a third option here. If you have a 0-day exploit, you can sell it to a government or a military. They tend to have pretty big budgets, and more, they're interested in developing cyber weapons, hacking tools that they can use against their enemies. We'll call this the gray market, and the money here is pretty big. So there's all these middlemen brokers for 0 days, they're like dealers. There's one Russian 0-day dealer who a few months ago tweeted out that due to high demand, their clients are now willing to pay $20 million, 100 times more, for a hacking tool that uses 0-day exploits that allows them to fully hack an iPhone or Android device. And then they specified that their client is a non-NATO country, which experts basically say is them saying like, this is Russia. Like, our client is Russia. These three markets for 0 days show us just how valuable these little bits of code
Tunggat ada mekanik kena satu hit mati.
They aren't just little bits of code. They are now weapons. They are access.
Yang penting lu KD yang hijaunya lu dapat damage, getok yang lainnya gampang.
Criminals want them, software companies want them, but more and more.
Tapi kalau mau enak di sini lu minimal 3 tap debo. Kalau lu di bawah 3 tap debo di sini clear speednya kurang. Mending grinding tempat lain.
Not just one 0-day exploit, but 4.
And what Iranian officials describe as an act of nuclear terrorism.
And this is
devouring lagi tuh, gacor.
Director of the CIA calls Stuxnet a game changer for warfare. Because whenever a country uses a big weapon, all of the other countries, especially the rivals, realize that they have to match that capability and ideally one-up it. That's how arms race works. That's how nuclear weapons have worked. And that explains the concern of the ex-director of the CIA.
Shadow Arena, tapi Shadow Arena banyak cheater ya bang. Gue gak suka. Gara-gara banyak cheaternya.
Changing the world and the balance of power between countries forever.
Somebody just used a new weapon, and this weapon will not be put back into the box.
So by the end of the early 2000s, after Stuxnet, it truly was the beginning of a new era of cyber warfare. In 2012, Chinese-backed hackers broke into the computer systems of over a dozen oil and gas companies. There was an investigation, and the FBI and Homeland Security concluded that the attack wasn't to steal anything or even to sabotage the infrastructure, but rather to, quote, gain strategic access for future operations, meaning to gain leverage over the United States. Investigators said that this was the first time that they had seen anything like this. That same year, an Iranian hacker group attacked Saudi Arabia, Iran's enemy, using a cyber weapon that is kind of like a digital bomb. It was a virus called Shamoon, and it got into the computers of Saudi Arabia's state oil company, wiping their hard drives clean. This thing spread across the company's networks, ultimately wiping data from tens of thousands of computers and rendering them totally inoperable. A huge blow to the company. In 2015,
323 plus 3 debo set kuat cepat gak? Ya harusnya sih cepat pak, tergantung kelas lah ya. Kelas lu apa? Kalau lu bilang Musa di sini lambat. Kalau lu bilang Musa di sini lambat. Jujur di sini lambat. Kalau lu bilang Musa di sini kurang cocok.
That looked like a kind of practice round to develop the capability that they want to have used globally.
This set a new precedent. People theoretically knew that cyber weapons could be used against electricity grids, which is like the lifeblood of our economy and society, but it hadn't actually happened until this 2015.
Striker okay lah, not bad.
These are just a few examples, but they're examples that show how cyber weapons.
Walaupun gue jarang lihat orang striker grinding di sini, paling cuma si Iflings doang.
Wasn't just hackers trying to steal
Tapi
money.
striker bagus, lumayan.
Trying to hurt their enemy, trying to demonstrate their capabilities, to deter their
Kalau lu bilang Musa, kayaknya lu minimal 5 debo deh kalau mau cepet.
National power. And indeed, in 2010, the U.S. acknowledged this very overtly by adding the U.S. Cyber Command as a new department to the military. Cyber war
Musa clear speednya sama kayak Succession Berserker.
Today we face threats that have increased in sophistication, magnitude, intensity, volume.
Makin cepat tuh range kelas sih. Kalau bisa Succession Witch sih. Paling bagus ini Succession Witch. Paling tinggi sampahannya sama Nova Awakening.
Cyber weapons are just bits of code. They're text files that are really small and easy to transfer around. So what happens when a cyber weapon developed by a military gets into the hands of everyone, and they can use it however they want? Well, that's exactly what happened in 2016.
The DNC has called the FBI after a deleting attempt to hack into voter databases.
During the 2016 presidential election, the U.S. was hit with a barrage of cyber attacks. This included the hacking of emails of the Democratic Party, a misinformation campaign on social media, and even an attempted hack of voter registration databases in several states. American intelligence agencies came together, they investigated, and they concluded that this was Russia. It was Russian hackers that were supported and directed by the Russian government itself. And the goal was to sabotage the American electoral system.
The Russians were responsible for hacking the DNC.
This was like a frenzy here in the United States. Like, everyone was talking about it. It was a huge deal. But in the middle of all of this, a post quietly appears on GitHub from a user by the name of the Shadow Brokers. This was a few months before the election. It was a tense time for a lot of reasons. They claimed that they had super powerful cyber weapons from the American government's most elite cyber war group.
Yeah.
The ones who created Stuxnet, and that they would sell these hacking weapons to the highest bidder. They would take their bids in Bitcoin. They released a few pretty impressive samples that actually looked pretty legitimate. They released an encrypted file that said contained more hacking weapons, but you needed the password for it. But they held onto it, posting every once in a while with a trickle of more information, and honestly, a lot of like bizarre rants on American hypocrisy and broken English that felt kind of intentional and caricatured. They didn't end up getting very much money, and it all looked fairly ridiculous. But then, out of nowhere, came this post.
Last week, the Shadow Brokers be trying to help peoples. This week, the Shadow Brokers be thinking peoples.
They were getting pretty spicy, and indeed, they released this password, this weird password that they said was the password to that encrypted file that they had posted earlier. And when you put that password in the encrypted file, you discover that it is exactly what the Shadow Brokers said it was. 67 files that comprised some of the most sophisticated and dangerous cyber weapons that the NSA had ever created. And among them, the most powerful of the bunch, a tool called Eternal Blue, which allowed hackers to break into and control the Windows operating system which is what most computers in this world use. Eternal Blue was like an open door. Back to our castle analogy, this was like a door into millions of castles, and the power to spy inside of the castle, to unlock any door, to steal the contents of the castle, to disrupt and break and destroy whatever you wanted inside of the castle, to lock people out of their own castle. Yeah, I mean, this was like a sophisticated military weapon that had just been duplicated and sent to anyone who had an internet connection. And what it meant was that the shadow brokers, in all of their like caricatured broken English, were actually legit. They had hacked in to our national security agency, our secret spy agency, and stolen the cyber weapons and sent them out to the entire world. Not just to other governments, but to anyone. So who are these shadow brokers and how did they do this? The answer, and the kind of scary thing about cyber war, is that we don't totally know. Experts think that Russia did this to send a very clear signal to the NSA and to the United States at large that, hey, we can do this. We have the power to break into your biggest secrets, and we will release them if we want to. So now, after 2016, we enter a new era of cyber warfare. Stuxnet was a big turning point. The Shadow Brokers and Eternal Blue is our next turning point. From here on, you see a new genre of more sophisticated, more powerful cyber attacks. Barely a month after the NSA's secret weapons leak out by the Shadow Brokers, a North Korean-linked hacking group uses them to deploy a virus that spreads to nearly every country on Earth within hours, locking up hundreds of thousands of computers, making them unusable, which halted hospital equipment, police departments, governments, and railways in over 150 countries. You're sitting there on your computer and this pops up saying that your files are locked and that you can get them back, but, quote,
you have not so enough time,
close quote, and that, quote,
you need to pay $300 worth of Bitcoin to do so.
Malicious software has been taking computers hostage in an unprecedented worldwide outbreak.
This is called ransomware. Basically, you ransom the computer files and you have to pay. This happened in a matter of hours. It was only stopped because a 22-year-old researcher accidentally activated a kill switch baked into the code. So the bigger crisis was kind of diverted, but even still, in just that few hours, as WannaCry was spreading to 150 countries, it caused hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe even billions of dollars of damage and economic loss. This showed us how powerful these NSA weapons could be in the hands of bad actors. And we learned this lesson once again when these same weapons were used by the masters of cyber warfare, Russia.
It's the single biggest attack on record.
It was June of 2017, the night before Ukraine's Constitution Day, when the Russian hacking group Sandworm deployed an attack that was similar to their 2015 electrical grid.
Tapi tahun ini nggak ada new region ya?
They had the NSA weapons in their hands, so it was
Belum
a whole
ada
new
kan?
level. This one was called
LOML Part 2 dong.
This thing was potent.
Tapi itu baru nanti dirilis di Korea Agustus akhir masalah.
Scary screen on their computer.
Kayaknya masuk di global mungkin Oktober atau November. Soalnya pas itu keluar sovereign weapon bakal keluar.
But don't waste your time. Nobody can recover your files without our decryption service.
It looked like another ransomware attack, saying that you have to pay $300 worth of Bitcoin in order to get your files released. But meanwhile, it was spreading super fast and wiping everything out in its path. It took down Kiev's mass transit system, airports, hospitals, and it rapidly spread through government agencies. Gas stations and power grids went down, credit cards stopped working, and it shut down almost every ATM machine in the capital. One person who was caught in the middle of this cyber attack described it as, life went very fast from what's new on Facebook to, do I have enough money to buy food for tomorrow? And it's a moment like this that we can really grasp just how fundamental this infrastructure is to our lives. And in this case, there was no kill switch. It was so viral that it spread beyond its target of Ukraine into other parts of the region, hitting the systems of a bunch of companies like FedEx or the shipping company Maersk, and soon tens of thousands of trucks were stuck for days with no computers to guide them. I mean, That's a lot of trucks. And many
Duit
others.
kita di
It
video
affected
dibawa kabur
tons
buat
of
reforma
companies
Crimson
and
Desert sialan emang
agencies
Pel.
and systems, all because of this one virus.
Tahu,
Unlike
Bang.
a missile or an invasion,
Gue
cyber
nggak
can
yakin tuh
hide
Crimson
behind
Desert bakal
this hacker
become a
looking
hit
screen.
karena itu
This
kan
doesn't look
jatuhnya
like
kayak
a
game
state
Assassin's
entity. This
Creed.
looks like a
Jadi
hacker
single
doing
player.
a ransomware attack so they can make some money in Bitcoin. But that's not what this was. This was a coordinated, sophisticated attack.
Enggak lah, duit
by the
kita dia
Russian
bawa
government
lari J
using
buat
an
beli
American
Bugatti
cyber
baru.
weapon to inform the world that caused an estimated $10
New
billion
Bugatti.
in economic loss and damages. And in the process, really blurring the lines of the rules of war, where usually like you know what a country did to you and you know how you're supposed to respond, and all of that creates this nice balance of like deterrence. That's kind of the lifeblood of stability in our global order. When you've got these like shadowy, like deniable attacks, it makes it way harder to know how to respond, to whom to respond, and like what's proportional. It just changes our view of conflict, which is why regimes like North Korea or Russia have leaned very heavily on this type of engagement, because as they become more isolated and as their military becomes less effective, this is a way for them to stay relevant, for their enemies to continue to fear them, because cyber is an actual
Udah
weapon of
berapa
war
game
now.
yang ngeluarin game langsung udah fokus video aja.
But let me just
Gue malah nggak
say
tahu mau main
something
game
that's
apa bang
probably not
selain
obvious
video.
and might be surprising
Nih
to
game
you
yang gue
if
mainin
you
sekarang
look
ya,
at the video, which is
cuma
that
3.
the biggest threat in the future,
BDO,
the thing that's going to be
Dota,
the
sama
biggest
Pokemon.
part of cyber warfare isn't going to be
Gue udah nggak tahu mau main
these
game apa lagi.
splashy, like shut down the electrical grid doomsday scenario.
Game FPS nggak
Those
bakat.
might happen, those are
Sakit
real
kepala
threats,
gue
we need
kalau
to
main
prepare
game
for them.
FPS.
But like any weapon of war, cyber is turning into a weapon that is being deployed
Game-game kayak Once
subtly,
Human,
that
gue nggak
countries
tertarik.
will use to get into the minds of their enemies.
Nggak ada
Like,
progression-nya
right now, we
menurut
could be
gue.
pretty certain that Russia
Gue
and
suka game
China
yang ada progression ya.
have quietly infiltrated parts of our infrastructure systems. They haven't done anything with that. But they're probably there.
Gak suka,
At least that's
game
what a lot
mobile
of
soalnya.
analysts and experts think. And that we have
Game
probably
mobile
done
gue
the
nggak ada
same
yang main,
thing.
kecuali
And
kayak
that we're
game
all just
gacha
sitting
gitu.
there with our little time bombs put into our enemy's castle in case we need to use them. And we want our enemy to kind of know that we're there. There's this list that I've been looking at of all
iya,
of the cyber
PO yang
attacks.
baru ya mau keluar ya katanya.
CSI is the think tank that I used to document.
Diablo, gue cuma main Diablo
And
3,
I was surprised
Diablo
that I
4 nya
hadn't
sih
heard
main sebenarnya, tapi nggak
almost any of them
lama,
because they're
bosen.
small, but they're frequent. To me, this is the future of cyber warfare. It's
Nggak
not
bisa diduitin
Stuxnet
Diablo 4.
and WannaCry. It's these death by a
Gue
thousand
kira
cuts,
bakal bisa
psychological
ada auction
warfare,
system kayak
revealing
Diablo
to your
3
enemy
dulu.
that you have
Tapi Diablo 3
capabilities
dulu auction
to
sistemnya itu
infiltrate their
diberhentiin.
systems. And in that sense, cyber warfare starts to look a lot like nuclear deterrence, like a shadowy, hidden submarine with nuclear weapons floating through the ocean somewhere, capable of hitting your enemy. And your enemy knows that. They don't know where it is, but they know that it's there. And any calculation that they make on conflict takes into account that that weapon is there and could be used at any point. This is the weird paradox of war and peace and deterrence. That one of the forces that has kept our world stable and rid of great powers conflict since 1945 has been the fact that we have
Serendia
very
beri aku
powerful
RMR,
weapons all
gas.
pointed at each other. And therefore,
Gue gacor nih
we don't
devournya
use them. Cyber weapons
Jadi PW gue
are
keren,
going the
nggak
way
ngantuk.
of that kind of deterrence.
Tadi awal-awal gue ngantuk
Hopefully,
sampai drop 1,
they'll never
2,
be
3,
used
4, 5,
in the
6.
way that we fear, that the sort of doomsday scenario of like they shut down the electrical grid and they do a full-scale attack. Yes, there will continue to be these moments where viruses spread, and to avoid those, just update your damn software. I hate it as much as you do, but like two-factor authentication, we gotta do it. All that stuff, it's there for a reason, because we live in a new world, and we should be prepared for that world. As for the war and the geopolitics of it all, I'm gonna keep an eye on it, because one thing in all of this is certain. Cyber is here to stay. It is something we have to think about and understand if we're going to understand the future of war.
PayPal
PayPal
Dan
is no
gua dapat
ordinary
devouring
company,
lagi.
and this is no ordinary story. On the one hand, this is one of the most inspiring tales you'll ever hear. How a small group of people in their 20s with
Ya,
no
pokoknya
real
Sen baru udah
finance
keluar, dah
experience
nggak mau
went
nyentuh
up against
game
big
beli satu
banking
lagi.
and revolutionized the way we send money. But there's also a very dark story here. How a company that promised so much has ended up ripping off its own users and being involved in countless scandals. There are very few companies with as many horror stories and unhappy customers as PayPal. This is also a story about how PayPal faced fraudsters, gave away free money, nearly went bankrupt, and on multiple occasions hatched a secret plot to overthrow their own CEO. And yet, despite all of this controversy surrounding the company, hundreds of millions of people use PayPal every day to send money around the world. And the team behind PayPal have come to be known as the PayPal Mafia, a network of powerful billionaires who are behind so many other huge internet companies, which means there's an extreme amount of power in the hands of a very small group. So, it's time we delve into the truth. Welcome to the insane true story of PayPal. Max Levchin was only 10 years old when the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded. He was in his house sleeping just 90 miles away. And as a Jewish family living in Soviet Russia, life was hard for the Levchins. So when the Russian economy started to decline in the late 80s, Max's family feared the worst and emigrated to the United States in 1991. In the early 90s, Max became fascinated with a gift he received, an early computer system. Max taught himself how to write and develop programs for it. And throughout college, Max explored ways to use the internet to improve his own life and the life of those around him. Together with some friends, Max wrote and sold 2 separate computer programs. And in 1998, using the money he made, Max moved to Palo Alto in California. Max was hoping to build his own internet company, and this was quickly becoming the hub for young, tech-minded people wanting to capitalize on the dot-com revolution. But one day, whilst trying to escape the intense California heat, Max attended a lecture so he could have a nap in the air-conditioned lecture hall. Except, instead of getting some sleep, Max was riveted by the lecturer, a guy called Peter Thiel. Peter was already moderately successful in several fields. He was a startup founder, a hedge fund manager, and now an investor in tech startups. So after the lecture, Max cornered Peter and explained that he wanted to build a tech company. Peter's eyes lit up. The two of them arranged to meet for breakfast the very next day to discuss Max's ideas. During the breakfast, Max talked while Peter listened politely. But then Max started talking about writing programs for the Palm Pilot, which was the first popular handheld computer. It seems very primitive now, but at the time, there was a lot of excitement around this little device that could store your contacts, notes, and calendar. Max explained how creating new applications for Palm Pilots was an untapped market, and that was exactly what Peter wanted to hear. Peter believed in Max's technical skills and funded his first idea for $100,000 in 1998. Using Peter's money, Max founded a company called FieldLink, which would offer security for these Palm Pilot devices. Peter and Max both had big dreams for this business. However, they soon realized that their idea was completely flawed. The market for mobile security didn't exist yet. There were simply not enough customers. Not just that, but they soon realized Palm Pilot's parent company had already partnered with another business for their security needs. FieldLink had to change its business strategy immediately. But Max and Peter were still both convinced that mobile computer devices like this were the future. So they began to consider what else they could develop for the Palm Pilot. They wondered, what if you could use the Palm Pilot to send and receive money? And thus, they decided to launch a mobile wallet for Palm Pilot that would allow users to send money to each other using the device's infrared ports. Infrared ports allowed wireless transfer of data between 2 devices within a 10-meter range. And at a time where most people still relied on cash and checks, the idea of beaming money to each other sounded impressive. So now that they had this new idea, FieldLink changed its company name to Confinity, a mixture of confidence and infinity. As for their money beaming program, they came up with a bunch of name ideas: eMoneyBeam, Zappio, Momo, Cachet, but they eventually settled on PayPal, which had a nice alliteration to it and could easily be used as a verb, like saying, just PayPal me. So with the business idea and name both sorted out, Peter and Max started recruiting. Although most of their hires were people they knew from college. The average age of their employees was just 25. But his camaraderie would later prove crucial to PayPal's success. Peter also knew that investment would be critical for a young startup like Infinity to sustain itself in the initial years. Fortunately, the dot-com boom was at its peak, and there was no shortage of cash in Silicon Valley. With a better business plan, Nokia Ventures agreed to invest $4.5 million into their money-beaming idea. This investment allowed them to hire more people and set up a proper office. But Peter also realized it was a great opportunity to generate media headlines. So rather than Nokia just transferring their investment to Infinity's bank account, they staged a publicity event where in front of the press, Nokia would wirelessly beam the money onto Peter's Palm Pilot. Not only would this make a great news story, it would show the world the potential of Infinity's idea. The plan was good in theory, but the reality was the technology was still unpredictable. The infrared transmitter was notoriously buggy and unreliable. So just days before the event, Max and the team pulled all-nighters to code and repair the two Palm Pilots that would be used during the announcement. If this payment failed, people would completely lose confidence in the concept before they'd even started. But thankfully, the money transfer worked. And it seemed people loved the idea. Well, except for one man. Sitting in his office, this man watched the news story about Palm Pilot money transfers and said, "That's a dumb idea. They're doomed." And that man was Elon Musk. Guys, before we get to the next chapter, I have some very exciting news for you. For a while now, I've been getting a lot of questions, such as, how are Magnate's Media videos made? How do you edit like this? Or hire an editor who edits like this? How do you write the videos? How has the channel grown so quickly? How do you get huge sponsors? And what does the behind the scenes of Magnate's Media even look like? Well, if you've been curious about anything like that, everything is now being revealed. At long last, I'm pleased to announce my full YouTube system is now available. You're going to be able to access everything I know about building a hugely profitable business with YouTube. Literally everything I've spent years learning, all laid out in an easy to follow system. That way, you can create your own documentary style channel like I have, and get paid to make videos about whatever topics you find interesting. I chose business stories because I like researching them, but this system will work for making videos about whatever you want. I lay out everything for you step by step, so you can make your own epic videos, build a huge audience, and get paid to make content you enjoy. Seriously, how insane is that? You can make so much money by making cool videos about whatever you're interested in, and you can do it from anywhere in the world with no boss and complete freedom. Because the beauty with YouTube is that once you know how to make great videos, you have a library of content that people can go back and watch. Those videos can be earning you passive income for years to come. Imagine making tens of thousands of dollars per month from videos you made over a year ago. But obviously, the sooner you start, the better. So if you want to learn how you can make videos like this and build your own hugely successful YouTube channel, just click my course link in the description below. I'm certain you're gonna love it, so just scroll to the description now and click the course link. I'll see you there. It was 1999 and Elon Musk had just sold his first internet company called Zip2, running him a personal payout of around $22 million at just 27 years old. But to Elon, this just meant he now had more money to invest in a new business that was much more ambitious. He wanted to...
Terus ini chatnya si Obed sama Cinurs.
Obed tuh yang ini.
Iya, masih dia. Cuma waktu itu kan kita waktu masih masalah si Cinurs kan kita masih main dan dia emang ini bener-bener. Lo lihat ini, so you don't understand my full potential of fucking shit.
Masih ronde malo dia anjing
nanti lihat deh, lo akan shock aja lu. Lu kira Briggs itu retard tuh, ternyata gue udah praktek yang lebih parah ini.
Hah?
Lu Briggs belum ada apa-apanya.
dia nggak tahu aja. Dia belum lihat berarti.
Belum lihat. Nggak ada tai-tainya Briggs itu. Kalau kita ngomong dalam skala keretardan, ya mungkin rankingnya SS kali itu Briggs. Gue udah praktek yang SS.
Anjir. Bisa gitu bang?
Wah gila lu, nggak tahu dia aja.
Enggak lah.
Untung lu nggak pernah berkutat di game yang namanya Soul Worker. Kalau lu pernah, oh udah.
Itu apaan anjing? Game kartu ya?
Bukan.
Gacor di foring lagi.
Eksplorasi obat simple, pada ini sebenarnya ngakak gue aja. What the fuck is this? Panjang tuh chatnya di Tinur.
Try to be good friend here, but you not accept me. But why? But I was great. I'm sorry, friend.
Yang kanan siapa?
Anjing broken banget Inggris. Capek gue, ntar gue bisa lagi so.
Emang iya.
Broken banget.
Heran kan lu aja.
Elon then hired Bill Harris as CEO,
Lucu.
keeping the former CEO
Aduh.
a successful financial software company. He also began expanding his software development team, and soon enough, the X.com product began to take shape. X struck a deal with Barclays Bank that allowed its customers to invest in mutual funds. Another agreement with a community bank meant X.com could now issue checks and
Dan gue berusaha ngajarin dia waktu itu main fucking shit.
money in it. You could withdraw cash at an ATM.
Dan sekarang gue tau kalau dia itu binatang. Oh bukan binatang tuh, dajal dia.
Udah lebih dari binatang.
Iya.
However, in 1999, X.com was renting a small office suite at 394 University Avenue in Palo Alto, overlooking a bakery. In a crazy coincidence, Infinity was occupying the adjoining office suite. These two companies, both looking to revolutionize online payments, are literally neighbors. Employees from both companies saw each other all the time. They often bumped into each other at the entrance to the building or in the restrooms and parking lot. And just like Infinity's PayPal app, X was also planning on letting users instantly transfer money to other users. Although it's important to note, this was
itu chat panjang apaan cuy?
Itu chatnya si ini. Siapa namanya? Si Cinurs itu dia. Si Obet yang dari kanan pokoknya. Dia cuma
belum baca, gue belum baca ya, tapi gue udah lihat kayak paragraf gitu anjing.
Yes. Yes.
Their neighbors were on the completely wrong path. Max and Peter were convinced Elon's vision for X would face way too much regulation, whilst Elon felt money beaming on Palm pilots was a dumb idea. So, you could imagine that in just a few months, they would be bitter rivals trying to crush each other.
Dimit.
The news story about beaming money from one Palm pilot to another was exciting. But the publicity didn't get that many people actually using PayPal. There were obvious flaws with the idea. Like, what if you left your device at home? And not just that, the majority of people didn't even have Palm pilots. So, in a late-night brainstorm to try and solve these problems, Max casually threw out an idea. What if on the PayPal website, you could also send money to someone's email address? In his mind, this was nothing more than a temporary solution until they found a better option. Certainly nobody thought this would be a core feature. It was simply meant to be a safeguard for people who forgot their Palm pilots at home. Then something interesting happened.
Oh, long.
Everyone was using the PayPal email feature much more than their Palm pilot system. Because anybody could sign up to send and receive money using just their email address, no specific device was needed. And that same year, more Americans chose to send emails than actual letters.
Padahal 10 menit lagi, long.
Sending money via email rather than using Palm pilots was actually way more useful.
3 jam grinding, 6B, lumayan.
Victor.
So what had intended to be the plan was actually an instant hit with consumers.
Victor.
Thousands of users, and this led the team to realize they needed to focus purely on email payments, not Palm pilots. However, in another crazy coincidence, at almost the exact same time, in the same building, and facing the same problem of acquiring more users, Elon Musk and X.com were coming to a very similar conclusion. Elon Musk was not remotely excited by email payments. He said, it's trivial to do a money transfer, essentially moving numbers in a database. It's super dumb. He did one in his 12. And yet, Elon would tell people about all the other financial services X.com was working on, and it was always the simple email.
Oh iya, ini pertama kali akun gue ini anjir. Pertama kali gue memegang akun memegang akun Lindsay ya. 297289. Oh enggak deh, ini setelah fanbase gue jadi anjir. Itu belum ada.
And thus, in late 1999, these two companies and neighboring offices, each with a very different original business plan, had accidentally stumbled into offering the same service, sending and receiving payments via email. And this would begin a bloodthirsty battle that would change banking and the internet forever.
Wah, ini gak ada orang begini goblok. Set vacation.
Both companies knew the online payments market would only have one ultimate winner, because they both understood one of Silicon Valley's most prominent principles, the network effect. The more people in a network, the more valuable that network is.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
So both companies were
10.
willing to throw money at customers in a race
16. Harusnya ada slot 84.
Customer growth became the number one priority for both PayPal.
Jadi di Friendlist lo ada ini coy.
To get more customers, both companies
Friendlist-nya Rivaldi kali ya.
Refer your friends.
Apa itu IT?
Ada Jimbus cok. Lagi login. Ini siapa namanya di akun Rivaldi ini? Siapa nih? Astrea, Reu, Piperita, Rizky, GEU. Nah, saya ada ini nggak? Rifana, 22 hari. Kok bisa ada casuals di sini tuh? Lu waktu itu pernah sama si Aikawa Kazu ya?
Yeah.
But of course, paying people to join and then paying them for referring others was a very effective way to get a lot of users quickly. Because by rewarding both the person making the referral and the friend they were signing up, it became a truly viral marketing campaign for both companies. Although both companies saw an increase in users from this, they still needed a clear use case.
Sempat main ini tuh.
And little did they know that their services had already become popular with an unexpected user base. The auction website, eBay.com. By 2000, eBay was a billion-dollar company with tens of millions of users. And eBay's auction model allows sellers to create listings of items that buyers could bid on. But initially, eBay didn't have a robust payment
Itu
service.
Pokemon ada new game mode apaan?
Belum lihat gue masih lanjutin ini yang gue doang.
Yang fresh start, apa itu fresh start?
Yang gue tahu adalah pokoknya si apa namanya UI-nya jadi jelek. Ada yang bagus sih, tapi UI buat milih di Pokemon dari generasi mana jadi jelek.
Ada White Herb anjing.
Iya ada White Herb. Ada Scoplens juga aja. Berarti kayak kalau Pokemon lu punya Super Luck nih, kritikal mulu anjir.
Mungkin.
So eBay sellers realized if they referred buyers to PayPal or X, they'd make even more money on every item they sold. It was win-win. And so thousands of eBay users started using PayPal or X.com. By late January 2000, PayPal had more than 100,000 users.
Bokurani imaru kiru
became 200,000 users. And it was clear the battleground had shifted to the eBay marketplace. Once again, neither company had planned that eBay users would be such a big part of their business. And initially, neither company had done any advertising to attract eBay customers. eBay users had simply adopted PayPal and X.com themselves if it makes sense. But once both PayPal and X realized this demand, they allowed both
Mini Black Hole sekarang nggak bisa dipindahin goblok.
Nggak apa-apa. Jarang dipakai. Jamur dan lain-lain udah nggak bisa dipindahin.
Yes, jamur, cari garbage tax sama ini.
Both trying to one-up each other in the race to become the service. The rivalry began to intensify. The PayPal team brought out a cake with the words diex.com written in frosting, whilst Elon personally sent emails.
Sekarang kalau lu start Pokemon bisa filter aja, gampang banget.
Both companies worked hard
Siapa?
Filter.
Literally sleeping under their desks.
Yang di Pokemon box lu.
They were also excited to be building something they believed in. However, whilst it may seem that PayPal and X.com were on an incredible growth trajectory, their balance sheets told a very unpleasant story. Because of the sign-up and referral bonuses, along with the lack of any real revenue model, both companies were losing money at a rapid pace. The more users who joined, the more money they lost. For For example, PayPal had to pay a 2% fee on every credit card transaction and was bleeding almost $100,000 every day. To make matters worse, PayPal had promised users its basic service would remain free forever because their plan was to make money from selling business accounts with extra features. But that would be a long, slow process to eventually recoup all the money they were spending to get customers. And PayPal was starting to worry they'd run out of cash before that happened. And if PayPal backtracked and started charging users now, they worried everyone would just use X.com instead. Meanwhile, right next door, X.com is facing the exact same issue. Strategy wasn't that different. He was happy to provide the email payment system at a loss immediately, believing that customers would also use X.com's other financial services, like the checking accounts, brokerage, and fees. But the reality was, users just didn't seem that interested in these other features, as they could already get those from the traditional banks if they trusted more. So, both companies continue to lose more and more money.
Tapi masalahnya kita ngedemeknya dari mana tuh? Soalnya kan lama-lama kalau main endless kan dia ada HP regen pasifnya itu loh yang nyebelin. Oh iya sih. Tapi repot berarti dashboardnya gue gabungin sama Meganium biar ada listnya, terus gue bongkar, dikeluarin, gabung lagi ke Garganacle, dapetin Salcure-nya dibuang, nanti Garganacle-nya.
Yoi.
Elon was confident that X.com would emerge victorious. He had more money than PayPal and could raise more if needed. Additionally, there was no way X.com would end up on the losing side. But Bill Harris, who was X.com's CEO, didn't share Elon's optimism. He thought both companies were spiraling towards mutual destruction. In Bill's view, the online payment market was only big enough for one player, so he thought the two companies would be much better off by merging together. And thus, a meeting was arranged with the two most influential people from both companies, Max Levchin and Peter Thiel from the Infinity team, who built PayPal, and Elon Musk and Bill Harris from X.com. Despite being fierce rivals, everyone could see the logic of having one dominant payment company instead of two competing companies. However, it's fair to say Elon was not particularly on board with the idea of a merger. He believed that X.com would crush PayPal eventually.
Hampir gue harus ngulang aja.
To at least explore the idea. The mood in the meeting was tense, and it soon got worse. Elon's first offer was that X should acquire PayPal, and that the PayPal team would receive just 8% of the combined value of the companies. This extremely lowball offer shocked Peter and Max, who left the meeting almost immediately. It seemed like the deal was a lost cause, and so the PayPal team pushed harder than ever to gain more users, which of course sent them closer to bankruptcy. But as PayPal moved through, the acquisition offers kept increasing. After some further negotiations, Elon eventually agreed to come down to a 55 and 45 split, which PayPal felt was much fairer. In fact, they were literally ready to agree to the merger, and then the big egos on both sides of the deal almost split.
Lu ketemu apa netas?
About how he was getting the seal, implying that
skill telurnya apa?
PayPal, Max was furious by this and left. Max then argued that the only way this merger could work is if they were genuine partners, which meant an even 50-50 split instead. Elon was ready to back out of the deal completely because of this. They continued their brutal fight.
Kemarin itu ada PT-nya gue sama dia.
His CEO, Bill Harris, got a bombshell. He told Elon that if PayPal would believe it was unclear which side would win, and it'd take a huge amount of time and resources.
Gue pengen kartannya gak dapat aja.
Merging the two companies was the only thing that made sense. And thus, Bill was giving Elon an ultimatum. But given X.com was right in the middle of a funding round, having their CEO leave right now would look disastrous for them. So, feeling like he had no choice, Elon agreed to the 50-50 terms in February 2000.
Astaga, gue kira perobat saya ini itu ternyata proplok aja.
The company kept the name X.com, which Elon loved, but it kept Infinity's PayPal name for their
proplok.
Users had become attached to it. Elon, the largest shareholder, took the role of chairman, while still retained his position as CEO. Peter Thiel was made senior vice president of finance, someone responsible for finding investors, and Max continued his role as CTO. The battle for the eBay marketplace seemed like it was finally over. Thanks to the merger, they could make a powerful pitch.
Breseknya dari Rayquaza itu kalau dia pakai outrage, karena ini baru kejadian tadi gue udah shiny merah, tapi udah kelok buat pakai outrage, udah pasti mati Pokemonnya anjir, sialan.
Because instead of competing
Jadi nggak
with
jadi
each other for
ketangkep.
customers, they can now focus on other serious issues like
Iya.
generating revenue and
Itu kemarin kayak gitu tuh.
And so at first, it seemed everything had worked out.
Habis itu mati dah dia kena outbreak.
12,000 new users per day. They later even secured a record $100 million in funding.
Yaudah lain kali gue spam Dragon Ascent aja lah. Jadi sekarang gue udah gak pernah pakai outrage lagi ya.
With $100 million in the bank and a growing customer base of 1 million PayPal users by the end of March 2000, it seemed like the company's future looked very bright. However, the actual reality was very different. Under the surface, several even bigger problems were bubbling up. Firstly, actually merging their systems together was not going to be straightforward. X.com and Confinity had entirely different user bases